Luxurious classic decor, a beautiful airy dress, and a magnificent ball where you never know what might happen. In this story, there is always a handsome protagonist and a beautiful heroine who are connected by unearthly love. But what would it be like if such scenes actually happened, and the main character of the novel only imagined how it all might look in real life? She could never have imagined that one day she would find herself inside that very intriguing story, where scandals are being woven around you. The main character clearly remembered that she received a letter about admission to the university and was sleeping in her room, but suddenly she found herself in a place unknown to her. In the very first minutes, as soon as she appeared in this world, some lady flew into her room and was indignant. Was the girl still getting ready? She grabbed her hand sharply and said that nothing would change if she continued in the same spirit, asking her to go with her immediately. The blonde lady with sky blue eyes warned them that they needed to go to the Royal Night Guard to sign important contracts. The main character looked with fear at the stranger who had just called her by the name Ludia. With each passing second, she became more and more aware of where she was because she had previously been fond of reading romantic novels. For some unknown reason, she possessed a heroine named Ludia Arlil Mertens and became a minor character in the novel. And the girl who ran into her room was named Elian Schnerelia Felioten, and she was sure that if they were lucky, they would be able to see the Crown Prince at the training ground. They say his beauty is out of this world, and Elian dreamed that her future partner would be just as handsome. She dreamed of meeting His Highness the Crown Prince, and wished that one day he would notice her and definitely fall in love with her. Elian was a character who would one day be executed for persecuting the Crown Prince, but the worst part is that Ludia would also be executed for the same reason. She was a dangerous individual, but she was also Ludia's only precious friend. While Ludia asked for time to think a little, Elian dragged her by the hand and was sure that if they came back, they would be able to inspect the training grounds. She was sure that there was absolutely nothing to think about here, but her friend had a completely different opinion, because she had been reborn just a second ago. Soon the ladies arrived at the training ground by carriage, where they were met by a respectable gentleman. In the end, her friend managed to drag Ludia along to finally see the Crown Prince and try to get to know him. On the way, the heroine tried to read spells and prayers, but it was all completely useless. After all, Elian really wanted to meet the prince, so that he would pay at least the slightest attention to her. And was this the original story's way of telling Ludia to accept her fate and the horrible death that awaited her? If there was any bright side to all this, it's possible that the main character will succeed, since she still has the memories of the original story, and also memories of the girl herself. And who knows, maybe she will be lucky and will be able to find a way to survive. And the young man who met the girls admitted that they had traveled quite a long way to get here. He respectfully offered to escort Lady Ludia to the training ground, since it was not for nothing that they had come here. When the young man thoughtfully offered to accompany the girl, the heroine was delighted, because no one had ever treated her like that before. The young gentleman extended his hand so that the lady could get out of the carriage comfortably, and at that moment she felt special. He also offered to accompany Elian, but she was already accustomed to such treatment and considered it proper towards her. She smiled sweetly at the venerable gentleman, and he could not contain his embarrassment, and he probably liked Lady Elian very much. It was quite unusual, and Ludia even seemed to feel special because of such respectful treatment. She wanted to know how far away the training ground was, but Elian had heard that His Highness the Crown Prince sometimes used them, so she was interested in this place. Perhaps she brought her here specifically to see him, and there are no training grounds here. From the original novel, Ludia remembered very well that this was where Elian and the Crown Prince would meet for the first time. It is at this moment that Elian will fall in love with the Crown Prince at first sight, so deeply that he will completely lose his mind. After their first meeting, she will begin to relentlessly pursue him to make him hers. But this story has too many different turns of events. But the only thing Ludia was sure of was that if she left the situation like that, then death awaited her in the future. So she said that she really appreciated her friend's offer, but they were not there for the excursion. And now she needed to make sure that Elian didn't meet the prince, because Ludia wanted to stay alive first and foremost. So the friend laughed and said that since they had come early and had some free time, the first thing they should definitely do was look at the documents. And she was sure that if Elian and the Crown Prince did not meet right now, then she definitely would not have to die in the future. But it seems her friend did not agree with this decision, and she angrily called the girl by name. As soon as her friend decided to go against Elian's rules, a menacing grin appeared on her face because she said to wait just a minute. She answered sharply, and Ludia was even scared for a moment because this girl was very angry. Elian made one request of the adjutant and asked him to wait for a while. She asked the young men to give them the opportunity to talk alone for just a minute and then get on with important matters. The streams were left alone, and Ludia asked the girl what something serious she wanted to tell her. And has she really developed any serious problems during this time that require a private conversation? Elian thought her friend was only sulking because she made her prepare the contracts alone, but they had always agreed that Ludia would be the one to do it. Earlier, the friends decided that Ludia would think and Elian would speak. Elian was sure that Ludia should support her from behind the scenes and not interfere too much in her affairs. Elian used all sorts of sweet talk and skillful manipulation to persuade the naive Ludia to get what she wanted, and this was her signature method. But since the heroine had been reborn and was a completely different person, she was not going to follow her friend's orders. After all, she was no longer Ludia and had no intention of helping her since the girl had completely different goals. She had no intention of taking revenge on behalf of Ludia, nor did she intend to simply sit and tolerate such treatment. And while the heroine had her own problems that she needed to solve, she decided to simply get used to this world, although it was quite difficult. She decided to just survive the first day and stay safe and sound, and think about everything else later. After making this decision, Ludia went about her business, but suddenly ran into some person. The young man immediately asked for forgiveness, because it was his fault that the girl ran straight into his chest and he blocked her path. So he looked into her eyes to make sure she was okay, because she certainly didn't expect to run into someone's head. All this time, Elian was nearby, and as soon as she saw her friend crash into the crown prince, she froze in place in surprise. After all, right now in front of the girls stood the venerable crown prince, with whom, according to the plot of the novel, Elian was supposed to fall in love right today. If the crown prince appeared here, it could only mean one thing, that their first meeting would take place right now. As soon as Elian first laid eyes on the young master, she gasped in surprise and goosebumps ran down her body. And Ludia clutched her head and only dreamed that their meeting would not turn into first love, and that she could live a happy, long life. Elian couldn't take her eyes off the crown prince, and he wondered why the stranger was looking at him like that. Suddenly a shudder ran through Ludia's entire body. At that moment, a young man approached him and said that it was time for the crown prince to leave. The young man bowed politely and apologized again for such an unexpected collision, which occurred through his fault. When the prince and his assistant left, Ludia watched them for a while and realized that right now she could go crazy. After all, the crown prince she saw turned out to be an insanely handsome young man with a charming smile and deep, alluring eyes. She didn't even understand whether a human face was allowed to look so beautiful, because the prince turned out to be even more handsome in real life, and she realized that she was now obsessed with beautiful faces. For a moment, she even forgot that her friend was standing next to her, while she stared intently after the departing young man. Everything went according to the plot of the novel, and it was the first meeting between Liana and the crown prince that definitely made an impression on her. After all, the lady with admiring eyes told her friend that it seemed she had truly fallen in love, and Ludia was trying not to go crazy. Elian assured that the young man definitely noticed her, and even gave her a passionate look of admiration. She even suggested that perhaps the prince would soon propose to her, but her friend was sure that this would not happen. After their first meeting, Elian began to perceive the prince as her future husband, promising that if she became a member of the royal family, they would still remain friends. Ludia tried to say something, but she didn't want to listen to her, blinded by the desire for the upcoming wedding. With her eyes full of madness, she asked her friend if Elian would help her get together with the crown prince. The girl understood that her friend had completely gone crazy, and she would no longer be able to think about anything. Afterwards, the heroines went to the commander, who was indignant and could not understand whether the ladies had come to sign a contract or to a party. While Elian couldn't come to her senses at all, she also couldn't say anything intelligible, and her friend had to take everything into her own hands. Ludia claimed that they came here to conclude a contract, but in reality she was so focused on the crown prince that she completely forgot the reason for their appearance here. What actually happened in the original story was when the ladies in such outfits appeared before the commander, who immediately began to criticize their appearance. Then, Elian started shouting that the contract was cancelled and that the man was not behaving appropriately at all, and thus ruined the deal. That was the original, and even if the contract fell through in exactly that way, it wouldn't be strange at all. But the heroine still wanted to go a different way, and when her friend had already started shouting about canceling the contract, at that moment, Ludia intervened. She asked the man to forgive their appearance and discuss all important issues without shouting and scandals. Ludia pointed at Elian and stated that her friend was attending the engagement ceremony tonight, and they were not taking this deal lightly at all. And they had a specific reason for appearing here, as the heroines were determined to supply high-quality ore to the knightly order. In such times, it was long to develop military power, and the production of weapons from high-quality raw materials directly affects the strength of the army and the safety of the knights. So Ludia bowed her head and asked the man to seriously consider this contract. But the young man was sure that no one could provide work of a higher quality than they could, and Ludia now did not understand at all how this could all end. After all, she had just bowed to the man, but to her horror she remembered that nobles never bow like that. A strange atmosphere hung between the heroes, and for some reason the heroine remembered about the bow only later. The man asked her to lift her head, claiming that she made him look like a terrible person. He asked to be told her name, and Ludia said that she was from a provincial noblewoman, not yet active in the capital. The man stood up from the table and told the girls that they had already discussed all the terms of the contract. And there was only one small detail left, the need to sign the papers on which all the important terms of the contract were described. Ludia picked up a pen to sign the documents. She realized that during all this time, the man still had not introduced himself. This man was the commander-in-chief of the Royal Knights, a marquis named Roman Bernhardt. Ludia wondered what it meant to be a marquis, since she wasn't at all strong in imperial titles. The man was not just some nobleman, but had enormous power in the empire, and was even higher than the duke. And only now did she understand what kind of person she had come to sign a contract with, and she really wanted their trading group to be under the protection of the royal guard. For some reason, her friend Elian was still silent and behaved very strangely in the commander-in-chief's office. At that moment, Ludia was holding a pen in her hands and was about to sign, but for some reason she stopped in an instant. The commander-in-chief assured that the deal would strengthen the bond between the trading group and their organization, and that it would benefit both of them. But suddenly, Ludia felt right now that she had just done something outrageous, and she couldn't understand the reason for her feelings. After the heroine left the Marquise's office, Ludia felt exhausted, because too many events had happened today. And if it weren't for Ludia's memory, which unexpectedly returned, today's success would definitely not have happened. The only reason she was so eager to make the deal was entirely because of Ludia, who worked harder than anyone. The girl who always remained in the shadow of the shine was precisely Elian. She wanted to sanctify it at least a little, and this was her sincere desire. She also had other reasons why she did exactly that. The heroine was sure that she did an excellent job. When she got out of the carriage, she was met by two heroes, who also noted that Ludia had worked hard today. Perhaps it was also due to a feeling of guilt for the actions that the heroine was going to perform from now on, not being a real Ludia. But she trusted her feelings and was confident that she was now on the right path. The mother and father greeted their daughter warmly and with special care went to their mansion. The Marquis was delighted that this young lady was quite impressive, much better than those useless officials who drop papers everywhere. Roman thought of supporting her in other ways, and if necessary, he could even provide her directly to another knightly order. None of his assistants had seen the master praise someone so much after their first meeting for a long time. And after Ludia left his office, the crown prince came to meet him, and he was now very interested in what kind of person he was. After all, this girl seemed unusual to him, and even more so, Roman surprisingly praised her behavior, which is not typical for an ordinary lady. The first day of the heroine's rebirth turned out to be very eventful, so she went to bed only late at night. Having settled comfortably on the soft bed, she was glad that she was finally alone. Her parents were incredibly kind to her, as well as her personal maid, and even Rosie treated her so well that the heroine was a little embarrassed. For now, she didn't think she would be able to go back because she had no idea how she ended up in this world. Perhaps she would return back in the same way she had entered Ludia, but for now, she only needed to focus on one thing, and that was to survive in the new world. It wasn't that it was completely hopeless, but there were rules and a new life here. Unlike the original story, she managed to make a deal with the Knight Commander, and that probably has some weight. If she managed to change anything now, perhaps her friend will also change her behavior in the future, or Ludia just wants to think so. Bursting into her room, her friend declared that if she became a princess, then in the future she could become a great empress. And in that case, Elian promised to make Ludia her imperial concubine, so that the lady would never need anything again. The imperial concubine had a special status. She was an unofficial wife, but the highest ranking among the concubines. But no matter how it is embellished, a concubine still always remains in the status of a concubine. And despite the title of imperial confidant, she is still a girl who does not have her own rights. The lady was surprised that her friend offered to become her concubine because for her it was simply absurd. And when her friend took her hand, Ludia realized that Elian had truly gone crazy. She suggested that her friend think about it, because if she became empress, she would definitely be busy with important things. Since she knew nothing about politics, Ludia, as her concubine, could handle government affairs, while Elian would take care of managing the servants. And she was sure that in this way, her friends would not be bored and she would be free, and this was a mutually beneficial and excellent plan in his opinion. Ludia understood that this plan was not at all reliable, but even if the situation changed, a person's character was already a secondary issue. Or her own friend is trying to set her up so that all the blame falls solely on Ludia if something happens. In response to this, Ludia said that her friend should forget about this decision, and that she would rather look for work elsewhere. After all, she was absolutely not interested in such a position, especially when her own friend was forcing her to do so. Elian didn't understand what the problem was, because she was sure that her friend would only be happy with such an honorable title. Everything has already become clearer thanks to her, on which much could depend. There was a letter with a beard seal on the table next to the girl's bed, and she had a rough idea of what was in it. Simply stopping Elian won't be enough, because she's not the kind of lady who would give up on her plan so easily. The envelope contained an invitation to the engagement at the Marquisate, and Elian had also already received this letter and sent confirmation of her arrival. There were rumors that the Crown Prince would be at the event, so Elian was definitely going to show up. Although she wasn't sure if her friend would go to the party with her, since she definitely didn't like them, but now Ludia confidently stated that she had changed her mind. The engagement, organized by the Marquisate of Asiren, was to take place over the course of 2 days. On the first day, the engagement ceremony of the Marquis's eldest son was to take place, which was supposed to be a wonderful event. And after that, a masquerade ball will be held to celebrate, where all the guests will be in luxurious carnival costumes. This means that there is a high probability that the Crown Prince will come, since all the high officials will attend this event. The Marquis's son and the Crown Prince were partners under the same master, and Ludia knew this very well. The ladies put on luxurious dresses and carnival masks and went to the event, preparing for a magnificent ball. The ladies immediately surrounded Lady Elian, who attracted attention and enjoyed talking to everyone. Looking at her friend, Ludia increasingly realized that she wanted to break up with her friend right now. But unfortunately, their families were tied up in business and it would be difficult. So to get rid of her, the heroine needs the right plan. The ball had just begun, but the heroine felt that the Crown Prince was already somewhere nearby. All the guests came in masks and carnival costumes, so it will be difficult to recognize the young man at the first meeting. Ludia had never drunk alcohol before, but now at the ball she had already had a sip of champagne, and she decided that since the Crown Prince had not yet arrived, she should go out onto the balcony to get some fresh air. But at that moment, while she was leaving, one young man who had been looking at the girl all this time noticed her. Ludia went outside and sat down on a cozy bench, and now she could finally sit quietly outside and breathe some fresh air. She even felt like there was more alcohol in the glass than she imagined, so her head quickly began to spin. At the most unexpected moment, when she was sure that she was alone, someone told her that the liqueur at today's banquet was quite strong. The young man immediately apologized for frightening the young lady, but her eyes were caught by the jet-black hair, and it was definitely the Crown Prince. The youth gave his name, and he was the second son of Count Brinsis, named Demthor. His polite smile and kind eyes inspired confidence, and he asked the girl to forgive him for his rudeness and unexpected appearance. He turned out not to be the Crown Prince, because the color of his eyes was completely different, and a slightly drunk Ludia gave her name and admitted that she was the only daughter of Viscount Mertens. The young man admitted that he had always been curious, because the lady was quite famous in the business world, and in high society she was known as a mysterious figure. Holding the glass in her hands, she understood that she was not very thirsty. She should at least take a sip out of politeness, because in front of her sat a pleasant stranger who probably wanted to talk to her. But the other hero was sure that everything had been destroyed 2 years ago, and now he realized that the nobles were still using it, leaving behind the 2 heroes. The crown prince appeared out of nowhere, and the young man was frightened by his appearance, jumping up from the bench. Ludia understood that she had been looking for him all this time, but by some strange coincidence the young man found her himself. As the mysterious stranger came even closer, Ludia clearly realized that the person in front of her was the very same crown prince. It was indeed he, and his huge ruby-red eyes could not be confused with others. The look was so penetrating, as if this man was looking straight into the soul and not at the human shell. His black, styled hair, snow-white skin, and cold charm couldn't help but attract attention. In the original story, Elian attended every party where the crown prince was rumored to be appearing, and it was there that she caused chaos. She had eliminated any young lady who showed the slightest interest in the venerable gentleman, so Ludia was sure that she had to warn him. But the crown prince had a completely different goal, and he wanted to see the girl who had managed to negotiate with the commander. He wanted to know if she could be the Lady Ludia that the master had recently told him about. Seeing the young man, Ludia froze in place and greeted His Highness the Crown Prince. She immediately asked if she could ask for one postponement, since their meeting would probably be fleeting. The young man was surprised that the lady immediately decided to get down to business and ask for a favor about which he knew absolutely nothing. Ludia came closer to the prince and said that something unexpected might happen tonight. And in the best case, he needs to be prepared for everything, so as not to lose his honor and dignity in front of the aristocrats. But probably the liqueur really was very strong, and the young man thought that the girl was crazy. After all, she had said some very strange words to him to be ready this evening, but he had absolutely no idea what she was talking about. The next morning, Ludia woke up quite late, and the first thing she was surprised to find was that she was not in her bedroom. She lay in a soft bed, although she remembered perfectly well that just a few minutes ago she had been at a gala ball. The heroine of the earth rubbed her eyes with her palm, wondering at what point she managed to fall asleep. But as soon as she got up from the bed, she felt a strong pain in her stomach and did not understand where it came from. Looking at her clothes, she was surprised that after the gala ball, someone had changed her into sleeping clothes. When she managed to open her eyes wider, she realized that she was not in her room, and she tried with fear to understand what was already happening here. At the very moment when she rose from the bed and became frightened of the unfamiliar place, a young man entered the door and asked if the lady had already woken up. The young man said it was a great relief that the girl had finally opened her eyes from her peaceful, restful sleep. But now the heroine was even more frightened because she saw this man for the first time, and she did not understand at all what kind of young man was standing in front of her. She had seen this man somewhere before, and his face was probably familiar from yesterday's event. After going over the events of the previous evening in her head for a bit, she finally remembered where she had seen that face. After all, it was this man who became engaged to Lady Shibernia yesterday, and it was he who was the lord named Ashir. In the original Ludia's memories, Ashir was a high-ranking official in the Empire and the second in command of the Imperial Army. He was remembered as one of the few friends of the Crown Prince. In other words, he was of too high a position to meet her alone, not to mention being her acquaintance, so the young man stated that the girl looked like she didn't understand anything at all. Yesterday, there was not just liqueur in her glass, but a drug that temporarily paralyzes the nervous system and then causes partial memory loss. The heroine was sure that she had not taken anything like this, and more precisely, this liqueur was unusual. Now she realized that the drink with the strange drug was offered to her by the second son of Count Brinsis, with whom they were sitting on the bench. It was not for nothing that she did not want to drink it, but she swallowed it anyway, simply out of politeness, because that was the custom in high society. Memories began to slowly return to the heroine, but not all of them, and with each passing second, she began to become more and more afraid. She ended up in the Ashir estate residence because the Crown Prince asked her to take care of her. In fact, Ashir's words were a great relief, because Ludia was worried that she had done something shameful while drunk. Ashir told the girl that regarding the crime that happened yesterday, His Highness the Crown Prince decided to deal with it personally. He plans to use this incident to root out the supplier so that something like this never happens again at social events. After all, it was the young man who was to blame for everything, the one who offered Ludia a glass of a strange drink. Ashir couldn't apologize enough for everything that happened, since it was his own engagement and he should have been more careful. Therefore, the Lord sincerely asked the lady for forgiveness, since it was solely due to the fault of the guests that she found herself in a strange situation. Ludia was sure there was no need to go that far, and she simply asked Ashira to raise his head and not apologize anymore. And even he would have a hard time keeping an eye on every corner, and here, the only one who should apologize is the young man who tried to poison her. Ashir was surprised, because the girl turned out to be completely different from what they say in those stupid, ridiculous rumors. In high society, Ludia was even given the nickname Timid, and probably previously she possessed completely different qualities. The past Ludia always declined party invitations. Even when she attended the event, she would just stand quietly next to her friend, which is how she got her nickname. The young man apologized for keeping the girl too long, because now she really needs to have a good rest. Before leaving, he decided to ask about something else, because this information could affect the future. Yesterday, Ludia said something to the Crown Prince, and the young man was very confused by these words at that moment. The girl was afraid that she had managed to embarrass the most respectable gentleman, and she tried to remember what she had managed to say. But the thing was that she only remembered up until the moment when His Highness the Crown Prince came and helped her. Ashir laughed and said that the girl turned out to be even more interesting than the master had told them. He thanked the lady for such a pleasant conversation and suggested that she take a better rest. And when he left, Ludia realized that everything had turned out too strangely. She didn't even understand how such things could continue to happen when only a few days had passed since her rebirth. But for now, she just needed to try to rest. She just needed to rest and not think about anything else. Probably her parents were very worried, because the girl was supposed to return when the ball ended, but she was not home all night. In the evening, she and the Crown Prince visited another mansion, where Ashir greeted them with respect and surprise. He immediately realized that this was the same Lady Ludia that the master had told him about just recently. She was walking with the Crown Prince, and the young man anxiously asked to borrow the Ashir's bed so that the girl could spend the night there. He literally carried her in his arms, and the lady did not move at all, and lay with her eyes closed. That evening, the Lord was very frightened because it was a crime, and no one would have thought that such a thing could happen right at the solemn engagement. That evening, the Crown Prince simply carried her in his arms, while the girl was completely unaware of anything and unconscious. She continued to mumble and mumble something, but her words were impossible to understand, as if she was in a state of severe alcohol intoxication. Therefore, the Crown Prince asked not to ask any questions and simply to borrow his room for one night. He promised that he would give the girl a rest, and this is absolutely not what he could have thought. At that moment, Ashir realized that spring would soon come for his dear friend, and their meeting probably happened for a reason. That evening, she found herself back at the Ashir estate, and things were starting to happen in a very strange way. Just think, the heroine is here again, and just yesterday she was in this same place. She really just wanted to relax in her room today, but her friend had completely different plans. She asked Ludia to go with her because they urgently needed to go to the estate today. And if it weren't for Elian, Ludia would now be lying in her room and sleeping peacefully after the strange events. But she had absolutely no choice. When she returned home, she saw a note in which she said that she was going to a party with her friend today. Kavez did a good job of telling her family that he accidentally served Ludia a strong drink, which is why she left the party early and disappeared. In the few days since her rebirth, too many events had happened that Ludia even thought about her unfortunate fate, and her friend noticed that the girl had been a little strange lately and began to treat her very coldly, which had definitely never happened before. So Elian decided to ask directly why her friend had suddenly become so cold in communication with her. Previously, Ludia willingly agreed to all suggestions and always helped, but now she stopped doing this. Ludia claimed that she felt sick on the way here, but Elian insisted that she had never shown it before, stating that when she behaved like that, her mood worsened. She immediately noticed that Ludia's taste and attitude had changed dramatically, and she was definitely not the same as before. Ludia chuckled as her friend just looked her up and down to make sure it was indeed Ludia standing in front of her. There was a reason why Elian was so selfish. The Lithium family were provincial nobles who were barely making ends meet just 3 years ago. That was until Ludia seriously delved into the world of business and raised the status of the Astria family trading guild. On the other hand, the Elian family were also provincial nobles, but they were powerful and had great prestige and influence. As a result, other provincial nobles considered their relationship with the House of Feliaton to be very important. And the venerable House of Mertens, to which Ludia belonged, was no exception. Instead of making idle chatter, the lady suggested that her friend greet the guests inside. After all, she brought her here because it would be difficult for her to meet the children of such high-ranking families alone. Besides, if they stand outside, people might think it's weird, since guests are supposed to greet each other first. Thinking about it, Elian realized that her friend was indeed right, and the people inside were much more important now. So she finally agreed to happily go inside to meet the high society. Ludia looked intently at her friend, who seemed not to understand what was more important right now. But most importantly, it was important for Ludia to follow her plan so as not to die tragically. The ladies entered the ceremonial hall and apologized for their lateness to the young men, who greeted them with respect. The young master approached the girl and admitted that he was very glad to see Lady Elian, and she also greeted the young lords. The young men were fascinated by the girl because after yesterday's conversation, one of them was looking forward to the opportunity to talk to Lady Elian again. She introduced the gentleman to her best friend, the head of the Astria Trade Guild, a girl named Ludia from the Mertens house. One of the lords was incredibly surprised, because he could not even imagine that he would meet such a famous lady here. The reputation of the Merchant Guild was simply incredible, and the lord heard that a contract had recently been signed for the supply of the family and the Royal Knight of the Guard. Everyone knew that the commander was not a man who could be so easily subdued, and he noted that Ludia seemed to be a very capable lady. Elian intervened in their conversation and stated that the deal was successful because they clearly separated them and that she had no idea how hard she worked preparing for this contract. She admitted that Ludia loves her job very much, and sometimes when she comes to social events, she only talks about it. And it would certainly be good if the girl was interested in a wider range of things, but now the lords were only interested in the trade guild. At such moments, Ludia was very glad that her friend was not very smart, because she pretended to be worried, but in fact, she was subtly manipulating. She also loved to attract everyone's attention, and she was sure that something was definitely going to her advantage, because the Liana could be called a real natural-born queen of bees. Suddenly, Ludia saw a familiar face in the crowd, assuming that it was the same crown prince she liked. But Elian's method may one day become poison, especially for those who had a favorable impression of her. And if Elian had really been smart, she certainly wouldn't have chosen the method she was about to follow. Because attention, which is easy to get, is also instantly lost and disappears without a trace. Ludia asked Elian to continue the conversation, and she decided to go and chat with the guests. She admitted that she acted a little impulsively, but in this situation, it was the best decision. From now on, the nobles will not be able to look down on Ludia because the girl's memories and emotions cover her as time passes. In the original, Ludia often wanted to get rid of her friend so that nothing would ever connect them again. By the end of today, the girl had to finish organizing important documents. But she understood that if she had to do everything, and even if she gave some of it to her friend, there still wouldn't be enough time. The burden of the family on her shoulders was not so light, but Ludia tried with all her might to change the current situation. So now her actions were enough, and considering everything Elian had done so far, it was absolutely zero. The guests slowly approached the ladies, and one of the young men recognized Lady Ludia, greeting her politely. The masked youth turned out to be the young Lord Asylon, who was glad to see his acquaintance. He was just looking for her and said that now was the most amazing time because this meeting had finally happened. As it turned out, his fiancée wanted to meet Lady Ludia and was impatiently awaiting her arrival. The second daughter of the House of Shubernia, named Rihanna, was so happy to see Ludia that she could not contain her sincere emotions. She was Ban's older cousin, but Ludia couldn't figure out who they were talking about, but if she was from the House of Shubernia, it could only mean one thing. It was one of the only 3 ducal houses directly linked to the imperial family. And Ludia wondered why such a person wanted to see her, implying that it was because of what happened that morning. Kavas had already told the whole story, while people were looking for excuses that she had simply drunk too much the night before. The situation was very unexpected, so Rihanna sincerely apologized that people had to go through all this because of them. These two were also nobles, but there was a certain contrast between them with one particular person. 3 years ago, few people knew about the Astria Trade Guild, and in fact, there is another reason why the heroes wanted to talk to Ludia. Since she personally took over the management of the business, she has achieved great success and raised her reputation in a short time, and it was only thanks to her that they were able to prevent damage during the Great Famine. Foresight to look into the future and accurate judgment of value helped solve the problem, and there was honesty involved. Most people think of this as Lady Elyon's achievement, but in reality the situation was completely different. This is just what people said who were completely unaware of the internal situation, and Rihanna looked at Lydia, wondering if everything was happening as they had expected. Ludia decided to remain silent to this question, since she had only been the heroine of the novel for a few days and did not know the smallest details of past actions. Turning around, Rihanna noticed that Mr. Ban had just arrived, and to the heroine's surprise, this person turned out to be His Highness the Hereditary Principal himself, whom she had seen just yesterday. Elyon immediately ran up to the young man, and Ludia didn't even have time to notice how she managed to end up there. Rihanna asked to talk to Ban after a while, calling him very shy and unlikely to approach a person first, and Ludia just wanted to take a little rest. The lady said it would be nice to use gratitude as a pretext for introduction, and winked at her new acquaintance. The young man was one of those who does not know what to do if he is left alone, so he immediately said goodbye to Rihanna and her new husband. Looking at all this, the heroine was perplexed as to what was going on here and what kind of relationship connected these people. She had the #1 problem in front of her, named Elyon, and there was also Rihanna, who had just given her a task. And clutching her head, the heroine began to get nervous about why everyone was doing exactly this to her. At the gala ball, everyone surrounded the crown prince and the newlyweds. I wish to express my respect and gratitude. But Ludia was pretty worn out by this society and the stupid secular conversations because the previous heroine also hated parties. She decided to intervene just in case Elyon tried to do something and interfere with her plans. The crown prince, surrounded by the attention of the ladies, was too far away, and she still had to get to him. Even in the crowd, the crown prince immediately recognized the girl whom he had carried in his arms just yesterday. And she shouldn't have put on the same mask as yesterday, but now they really had to figure out the events of the previous evening. Therefore, the young man did not pay any attention to the girls demanding his respect, but only looked at Ludia, who was standing in the distance. He recognized her from the first seconds, and not only by the mask, but by her huge red eyes, full of kindness and sincerity. Suddenly, one of the girls gave a strong push to the lady standing behind her, and Ludia almost fell to the floor with a crash. But since the young man was watching her closely, the crown prince immediately realized that the girl was in danger. He ran up to her with lightning speed so that she wouldn't fall, and the heroine found herself in his arms again. Just yesterday, she leaned against his chest, and their bodies were too close again. After all, yesterday, the lady herself approached the gentleman with a request for help, and these situations were absolutely identical. Ludia thanked the young lord for catching her, but only now did she realize that the person in front of her was the crown prince. And again, he saved her from unpredictable circumstances, and again, for some reason, he was there. The crown prince chuckled that this was the second time he had saved the girl from some strange, incomprehensible situation. He smiled sweetly, taking her hand, and admitted that he had already been forced to catch her a second time so that she would not be in danger. The young man admitted that it seemed the girl should be more careful because for some strange reasons she constantly finds herself in ridiculous situations. This time everything worked out, and the young man and his assistant decided to go to the guests, and Ludia felt incredibly embarrassed. She had been thinking about this for a long time, but there were an incredible number of thoughts in her head that had simply gotten mixed up over the past 2 days. But one thing was clear. This handsome man's smile was no joke, and it was no wonder why Elyon immediately fell in love with him. The heroine felt that someone was right behind her, and she also felt the approaching touch of a hand. It was her friend who angrily declared that she had just seen everything with her own eyes. She grabbed her hands and screamed while Ludia was in the crown prince's arms, and she almost felt a little jealous. Elian held her friend's hand tightly because she couldn't control her anger, and the girl felt a strong pain on her wrist. Elian stated that the Crown Prince could not help her in any way, since he probably did not even know her, and they were not destined to get to know each other closely. Ludia asked why her friend was sure that she and the Crown Prince were completely strangers. After all, is it really possible to spend a whole night with a stranger and still remain unknown to each other? When Elian heard about this, she looked at her friend with frightened eyes, because they were talking about some night spent together. She angrily asked if Ludia was really saying that the Crown Prince had spent the whole night with her. After all, for the girl who was going to become his legal wife, this was simply unacceptable, and she could not believe it. She knew that Ludia had suddenly disappeared last night, but no one knew where exactly she was. That's why Elian didn't even believe her friend and considered her words to be just a regular lie. And if what she says is really true, why does the Crown Prince continue to look at Elian? A friend suggested that perhaps he wasn't looking at her at all, since she was completely unfamiliar with the Crown Prince, and they were, in theory, nobodies to each other. The girls were tired of their friend's angry questions, so she asked them to stop and come to their senses, because His Highness would not give his heart to someone he had never even spoken to. It would have been great if it had ended in just a misunderstanding, but Ludia knew her friend very well and wanted to warn her in advance, because when she would pursue him, she would become even more aggressive. Her attraction to the Crown Prince could prove fatal not only for her, but also for Ludia, who wanted to remain safe. Suddenly, Elian declared that Ludia should go and say this for everyone present to hear. Because she couldn't believe her, she asked her to go to the Crown Prince right now and tell him what happened last night. Ludia felt like an animal in a closed cage, where someone was trying to control and manipulate her. To be honest, she didn't want to pretend that she had fallen for her friend's provocation, because she knew perfectly well that everything that happened last night was true, and Elian demanded proof. The Crown Prince might ignore her, but if she appeared before His Highness, everyone would only look at her. Even in the midst of this worry, Ludia was confident that he would not dare ignore her. Seeing him looking in her direction even amidst the chaos, Ludia clearly caught the young master's attention, because she saw and felt how the Crown Prince was looking exclusively in her direction, but not in the direction of her friend. So Ludia confidently approached the Crown Prince, bowed politely, and greeted His Highness. She admitted that she really wanted to thank him for his help yesterday because the situation was too unexpected. The lady said she hoped she had not become a nuisance so late at night, but the young man said it must have been very noticeable. He was even told that he looked at her too much, but he tried his best to restrain himself and not show it. He also asked for forgiveness from my lady, which meant that he really was looking at her, and now she had absolutely nothing to be embarrassed about. A magical aura arose between the heroes, and looking into each other's eyes, something inside each of them turned over. The prince said that he would probably have to leave, but Ludia did not understand the reason for such a quick departure. Because he was there, the party was constantly interrupted, because the young man was under the close attention of the ladies surrounding him. So the young man stepped forward and declared that the party was being held in honor of his engagement, and not at all for the Crown Prince, who was the center of all attention. He laughed and turned to the guests, who should have been paying attention to him, because the meaning of the celebration was completely different. The young man managed to defuse the situation, and his bride stood nearby, looking forward to the continuation of the party. She took Ludia by the hand and said that they should go right now, while they had a wonderful chance to communicate. Tomorrow's papers would sell like hotcakes, but that was absolutely no problem. But now Rihanna was going to take the lady away so that no one would spread ridiculous rumors about her and the Crown Prince. And at that moment, a sad and angry Elian stood behind all the ladies, not understanding why all the attention was focused on Ludia. She was completely dissatisfied with the behavior of her friend, who had previously simply stood behind her and timidly stood nearby, not having her own opinion. The Crown Prince went with Ludia to a quieter place and decided to ask about her words from yesterday. She admitted that she just wanted Elian back, and that was the point of the whole conversation. The young man remembered that Ludia had told him to be ready tonight, but she hadn't said another word, and the situation was truly strange. Rihanna brought Ludia with her, and the venerable Crown Prince himself followed them. Having passed here, the heroine felt that she was suddenly returning to reality, where the main character was only she. Taking off her cute mask, Rihanna asked if there was any tea that the girl particularly liked. Ludia was not at all picky about food, and Rihanna considered this a very good feature. And until now, it was unclear why the girl brought her here, and perhaps it was just out of common decency, or perhaps it was something completely different. A moment ago, Ludia felt like Rihanna was probing her when she spoke of Lady Liana's accomplishments and how most people thought of them. But now Rihanna was overly friendly, and she caringly asked Ludia to settle down on the cozy sofa. It seemed to her that it would be better to bring her husband quickly, so she decided to go after him, leaving the heroes alone with each other. The girl was surprised, because she was sure that the lady had been trying to talk to the prince from the very beginning and was looking for him. She asked if there was a reason why they couldn't be alone with the prince, and asked not to tell them that you were already dating the young lord. Ludia said that she had no relationship with the lord, and Rihanna suggested that the hero have a good time, and she went off to look for her husband. Neither the crown prince nor Ludia expected that the two of them would end up in such a situation, and they felt uncomfortable for a moment. Ludia had not expected to be alone with the crown prince at all, as she was still ashamed of the previous situation. Rihanna wished the young people a great time. The atmosphere was slowly becoming too strange. The young man was curious about what kind of person Ludia was, and he wanted to talk to her, and now they had a great chance. The heroine wondered if he had studied with his young lord Assarin, but how could the master he recognized have mentioned her? Marquis Bernhard was the commander of the knights and also the master of the crown prince. Apparently the crown prince was Ashir's classmate, and the master was their mentor. He turned out to be an even more incredible person than Ludia had imagined. The crown prince still had one more question he wanted to ask about, and that was what the girl had told him yesterday. All night long he tried to understand what the lady meant when she said those very words. Ludia asked if he really wanted to know what she had told him last night. She apologized as her memory was clouded, possibly due to the effects of that strange drug. In an instant, the young man's face changed and he began to look disappointed. The heroine was afraid that she had said something wrong. Ludia was very worried about the previous situation, and with all her heart she tried to understand whether she had said something unpleasant. But the young man only smiled and asked to be called by the name Ban, and he himself was also going to call the girl by the name Ludia. Right now, he asked to be called informally, and not even by his name, but by his nickname, which was very surprising. His Highness the Crown Prince, Verta Shilin Ban, as befits him, who had firmly held the position of Crown Prince for the past 10 years and was considered the most outstanding of the 5 siblings. And at present, he is called the most likely candidate to become the next emperor. He was the main character of this novel. The heroine wondered if it was normal for a man like him, and for her, who was nothing more than a secondary character, to call him so familiarly. Embarrassed, the young man noticed the strange expression on the girl's face and asked if she really didn't want to call him that. Ludia said that this was not the case at all, because she was thinking about what the classification was for, and whether they could really communicate informally. Ban admitted that there is nothing strange about this, and they can communicate in the way that is comfortable for them. The heroine still found it difficult to call the Crown Prince by his nickname, but she realized that now was the time to improve relations. So she named him Ban, and tried to get used to this kind of communication, which was not at all typical for their titles. He responded in kind, and tenderly called her by the name Ludia, and at that moment, a special connection arose between the heroes. Trying to hide her embarrassment and flushed cheeks, the heroine stared into his deep eyes. And just now she noticed a charming, pleasant smile, not understanding why the gentleman was smiling like that. The young man was completely confident in his actions and words, and his gaze reflected great respect for the girl whom he had known for only a few days. He reminded you again of yesterday's words, because Ludia then clearly made it clear that the Crown Prince should be ready this evening. So far, the girl herself could not understand what she meant and whether it was worth telling the whole truth. So at first, she asked for forgiveness for her unworthy behavior, assuring that she did not remember anything at all. She was truly sorry because she would only think that she had behaved so shamefully, but first of all, she did not want to die at all. In fact, the young man felt a little embarrassed that he might attach importance to something trivial and misunderstand her words. And Ludia was completely surprised that he remembered them and even more so, thought about them for a long time. But these words were etched into the young man's mind, and that evening he could think of nothing else. The lady found this topic a little awkward and suggested talking about something else, since she still couldn't find the right answer to this question. But being in the same room with the Crown Prince, she had absolutely no idea what she should talk about. And suddenly she said that the color of their eyes was the same, because the prince had the same deep red eyes. The heroine just had a reddish tint, but Ban had a deep color, so it was very beautiful. These characteristics belonged to the Battenberg family, jet black hair and burgundy red eyes. Before they became an imperial family, the Battenbergs were a family that dealt in murder. Black hair was useful for hiding in the dark. Red eyes signified an intuition of death, so they were called the Eyes of the Reaper. All this time, the young man thought that the color of his eyes seemed frightening, but it seemed to Lydia that he did not frighten her at all. She thought his eyes were beautiful, the color of ripe rubies tinged with crimson red, and that color was incredibly beautiful. After these words, the young man abruptly turned his head to the side, and probably her words embarrassed him greatly. Ban even asked the girl to wait a minute while he calmed down his feelings and flushed face. Suddenly he headed towards the door, and the heroine did not understand at all why he went there. She remained alone in her room and tried to understand why the young man decided to leave after her words. Lydia sat comfortably on the sofa with a cup of tea, all alone, and even assumed that the crown prince was going to tease her. Everything turned out completely differently, and the young man left the room because he could not contain his embarrassment. He told Rihanna that he ran away because he felt embarrassed after the compliment and quickly left Lydia's company. It was one of the most elaborate excuses she had ever heard, but to the boy, it was no excuse at all. Now Ban is firmly in his position as crown prince, but back then he was just a junior and his position was quite precarious. Everything changed after he took Marquis Bernhardt as his mentor, and the royal family's supporters gathered around him. And their main goal was to confront the powerful aristocratic faction. Talent and looks, he had absolutely everything. He knows his strengths well and knows exactly how his appearance affects noblewomen. But he was completely hopeless when it came to romance, and was trying to figure out from his sister what to do next, since he definitely couldn't go back to that room. The sister smiled and said that she thought she was raising a wolf, but she raised a confused puppy who immediately ran away from the first compliment. She asked if the young man had at least thanked the lady for the compliment, but at that moment Ban simply fell silent. And once Rihanna realized that he had left the lady alone in that room without explanation, she became incredibly angry. At that moment, the young man did not understand what to do, because the compliment from Lydia was like a lightning bolt through his body. He acted awkwardly, and his sister could not believe at all that the young man simply ran out of the room without saying a word. But she understood. Ban's reaction was understandable, because this man had a huge heart and good feelings. For a man with his past, she looked into his eyes and called them beautiful, because those eyes had always been considered a symbol of murder. Most people are scared and avoid them, but Lydia was the first person to call them beautiful. The boy had simply never heard anything so beautiful in his life. Ban is not used to people. He only pretends that he knows how to communicate with them, but in reality he is just trying to look competent. And maybe he was still facing death threats, and that made him feel wary. Rihanna's husband noticed that His Highness the Prince is indeed inattentive and still does not understand many things in this life. But Rihanna said that he should learn to understand hints, because he is not strong in this either. And if he doesn't want a divorce right before marriage, he should change his behavior a little. Rihanna was a strong woman who raised 2 younger brothers on her own, and Kawis and Ban were younger than Elian. That night, at the Mertens estate, Lydia lay in her cozy bed again, reflecting on the chaotic day. It wasn't that everything was bad, although at first, when the prince left her alone, she thought that he was just trying to make fun of her. But her assumptions turned out to be wrong, and everything was not like that at all, and the Ban had other motives. He admitted that he had not intended to leave Lydia on purpose, and that he had circumstances, and since he had explained it hastily, that was quite enough. They ended up talking for over an hour after that, by which time they were even talking informally. Lying in her bed, the heroine wondered whether such communication with a titled prince was normal. Even someone as quick-witted as she could tell that the young man was clearly interested in her. It doesn't mean that she dreamed of becoming Cinderella, but her life became a little more complicated because of her friend. But overall, she was happy that she was reborn as Lydia. A noble family, better looks than before, a luxurious house and a huge inheritance. And to be honest, this life was not bad at all. No, most likely it is not just not bad, and if you look at it from all sides, it is simply wonderful. After all, the heroine seemed to have managed to win the most important lottery ticket for a happy, luxurious life. Besides, Ludia had earned enough money in the last few years to live in luxury for the rest of her life, and the Mertens family was far from the central political chaos. There could not have been a better time to be reborn right now, and this was the perfect moment. But Elian, with her pride as her only asset, she will not leave everything just like that. And she will never forget the events of today, and they will probably have a serious conversation. The heroine just wanted to never meet her friend again and wanted to say goodbye to the Liana forever. The next morning, Ludia appeared in the office of the director of the Astria Trade Guild. Elian was already there and said that her friend was a little late today because important things need to be started earlier. She laughed and suggested that perhaps it was because of the last party that her friend hadn't been able to get up early. Firstly, Ludia didn't understand what she was doing there because she definitely shouldn't have been in the office. The friends stated that they had been working together in this office all along. The party was over and it was time to catch up on the work they had missed. She couldn't afford to stop, and Ludia didn't even understand what kind of work she was talking about. In her recollections, her friend often never did real work, but only walked around the shops during working hours. So now she wanted to find out what Elian was up to and what she was planning to do right now. In the past, instead of doing the work, she would just dump everything on her, and Ludia never saw her come early and organize the paperwork. Now she says she can't afford to put off work tasks while being in her office from early morning. Ludia asked her friend not to talk nonsense and tell the whole truth because she clearly had some kind of plan in her head. And what's more, my friend definitely wanted something, but she had absolutely no intention of telling the truth. If anything, Elian grabbed the girl by the hand and declared that she should be the one asking why her friend started acting like that. After all this time, Ludia obediently followed her orders and never had her own word. And now, her behavior had changed dramatically, and this irritated Elian even more, because for some reason she was the first to meet the crown prince. Elian was probably planning to play a certain game, and Ludia understood this perfectly well. She suggested that they decide depending on what Elian was going to do next, since she knew nothing about the insidious plans. But the girl only asked her friend not to worry, promising to work even harder than before, putting all her efforts into development. Ludia didn't even expect Elian to pull something like this, and she turned out to be much more cunning than she thought. Elian was definitely not just some stupid girl, and she had a full-fledged plan in her head that she didn't want to reveal. She was clearly hiding something, but Ludia had no idea when her friend would stab her in the back or set her up. The heroine decided to simply forget and wanted to return to how everything happened before. Sitting on a bench in the yard, her attention was drawn to an unfamiliar man in a black robe, to whom she immediately paid attention. The man's head was covered by a hood, so she could not see his face as he stood with his back to her. But the heroine was sure that this was a fantasy world, and anything could happen here. Right now, she needed a ride, but the passing carriage was reserved, and the heroine promised to pay double. Perhaps she just needed to find a way out of here, and she was completely confident in her abilities. The coachman promised to take Milady there in comfort, and soon they arrived at the appointed place. This place is considered the most famous tourist attraction in the capital, but not everyone is allowed to enter here. People call it by different names: the Tower of the Sage, the Tower of Wisdom. It was founded by the most revered archmage on the continent, called the Blind Tower. The heroine came here hoping to get advice, and the consultant asked what kind of help she needed. She gave her name as Ludia Mertens, and the young man was surprised that they were talking about the Astria Trading Group. She introduced herself to the representatives of the trading group, and the young man's guesses turned out to be correct. The heroine immediately said that the consultation concerns travel across dimensions, and this is the main question that interests her. She thought this place looked like a mansion from the outside, but inside it was even more beautiful, and there was just one person here who specialized in traveling through dimensions. This man's name is Teferi Akilar. He is over 200 years old, and he is the master of the Blind Tower. There was another person at the session now, so the heroine was asked to wait, but she looked at the elevator, assuming that it was powered by magical energy. The consultant said that he had a couple more words about the master that the lady should definitely know. The master has a rather nasty character, so he asked if my lady was sure that everything would be all right during the conversation. But Ludia was already used to such people, and said that they would definitely not have any problems in conversation. The consultant even asked again if the girl was confident in her actions, but her attitude was extremely serious. They placed their hands on the magic crystals, and the consultant warned the girl to hold on tightly, because now they would be climbing. As soon as the lady touched the magic stone, she immediately felt a strong movement, and she had never used a magic elevator before. It was just crazy, because they weren't going up like an elevator usually does, but were heading straight down. At the moment of transfer, Ludia felt dizzy, and she even thought that she would never come here again. No doubt he was deliberately making fun of her and said they were leaving and sent her down. But suddenly, as they found themselves at the appointed place, the girl heard a painfully familiar voice. It was the Crown Prince, who looked at the lady in surprise and asked what brought her here. Ludia said that she came to get a consultation and there was someone she needed to meet with. She forgot the name, but the man's title was Master or something like that, and it seemed like Ban knew what kind of man he was. He smiled and said that this man was called the Master, and it was probably to him that the lady was heading. And if that's what he really calls himself, this man must have truly terrible taste. The Master was the owner of the tower, and he pathologically hated everything boring, so he basically warned Ludia to get straight to the point, because sometimes he even swears at people. If Master could scold the Crown Prince, he was definitely not an ordinary old man, and now Ludia prepared herself to meet the strange man. As she placed her hand on the door handle, Ban suddenly touched her hand, which was completely unexpected. He looked into her eyes and asked if the girl was busy after the consultation, and the lady did not expect to hear such a frank question. She admitted that she was not particularly busy with anything because she really did not have any plans after the consultation. Ludia even joked that Ban was trying to ask her out on a date, which definitely couldn't be true. But the young man only replied that the girl had somehow guessed about his proposal, and he felt embarrassed that he had not walked her home yesterday, so he decided to treat her to some delicious food. In fact, everything was going perfectly, but the girl was so busy that she completely forgot that she had to warn about her friend today. She suggested that the young man wait for her while she was at the consultation, because now she had an important conversation awaiting her. Entering the office, Ludia politely informed the Master that she had come to get a consultation. But instead of the grim old man she was thinking of, she saw a young lady with red hair trying to reach something from the very top shelf. The girl was outraged at where the world was heading because the lady was just standing and watching instead of helping her. But Ludia was more fascinated by the girl's plump cheeks, which she just wanted to pinch. She called her baby, but the girl loudly declared that she should be called Tower Master. Her name was Teferi, and this girl was one of the last surviving members of the Akilar line. The girl asked what problems had brought the lady here and immediately realized that she was a foreigner. Ludia didn't understand what she meant because she had never heard anyone call her that before. The Teferi clan was famous for its heightened empathy, so the girl thought that the heroine already knew everything. She could just feel it, that alien energy flowing through her entire body. The girl experienced a strange feeling as if the heroine's soul was not from this world at all, and it definitely did not belong to the world of fantasy. Each soul carries a unique wavelength, and the heroine had a very distinct color that was radically different from the others. It's hard to believe, but the lady heard that these girls are over 200 years old, but she speaks from the body of a 10-year-old child, holding a magic ball in her hands. The girl admitted that it was simply fascinating that a 200-year-old man lives inside the body of an 8-year-old child. Ludia was incredibly scared when she heard that a 200-year-old man had taken the body of an unknown child. But things were different, and the Master did not take her body at all, but one day performed a magical ritual. The Master also carried out what is called the reunification of souls, and this is a unique ability of the Akilar family. To explain it properly would require touching on myths and legends from thousands of years ago, so the girl suggested skipping the long story. The reason the heroine came here was to ask about the connection between souls and dimensions, but the girl already knew about this in advance. Ludia immediately asked if there was a way she could return to the past life she came from. She was sure that the Master would help her, but there were practically few ways to return to the original world. More precisely, the Master stated that the heroine has no way to return back, and now she is a resident of this world. It wasn't the answer Ludia had hoped for, and she was instantly disappointed, but still settling down here wouldn't be such a bad thing. The Master assured her that it wasn't a completely terrible place, and that it would be easier to adapt than even Ludia imagined. But most of all, the heroine was worried that her family was still in another world, and would she never see them again. The girl thought about it because the heroine probably wanted to meet her family, but in that case there was no one on the continent who knew more about this area than she did. Other fields of science may yield different results, specifically the science of theology, which the master reported. The study of the gods is the study of invisible, absolute entities, and is a completely different field from magic, which deals with measurable and observable forces. In the field of science they study and manage, Ludia may find another answer, as well as in the Western Forest. The heroine asked what Western Forest they were talking about and who she was supposed to meet there. There was a man in the Western Forest who could probably know more about moving through time spaces. The girl confidently stated that her father was there and that he would probably be able to help Ludia return home. All this time, Ban was eagerly awaiting the end of the consultation so he could see Ludia again. When she opened the door, there was genuine joy in his eyes, as if he saw something special. He would not have minded waiting for her longer, but the lady still apologized for such a long wait. Finally, the heroine learned a little more information and was now ready to go with the prince on an unexpected pleasant date. After talking, she thought that she really couldn't return to her original world, but now she heard it out loud and was still in shock. Could all her chances really be zero? And during the conversation, the master asked if anything unusual had happened before the move. The heroine simply fell asleep while reading the book, so the girl decided to ask her father, who had lived for more than 2,000 years, about the possibility of returning. But the heroine understood that no one would provide services for free, and she would be grateful if she asked what kind of payment was being discussed. All the technician asked for was a signed guarantee that said the Mertens Group would cover any cost they named. The heroine couldn't even imagine how many questions this master had, but now she just wanted to pinch this cute girl on the cheek. The fact that the master agreed so easily means that it could be worth a fortune. And while they were sitting in a cozy cafe together with the young man, the lady was immersed in her thoughts the whole time. The young man used a transformation spell ring to disguise his appearance and asked if it would be an inconvenience to the heroine. Now, instead of black hair, the young man became a blonde with long hair, and he even offered to cut it if Ludia did not like this image. The lady smiled and admitted that long hair suited him very well, and asked if he had used disguise to avoid unnecessary attention. But even despite this, all the eyes of the ladies sitting in the cafe were still turned towards the crown prince. And so they ended up in the company of noble ladies, and attracted even more attention than they expected. Ludia was even afraid to turn around, feeling intense gazes on her from all sides. Therefore, in any case, the young man already looked great, and she was ready to see him like this, asking him not to cut his long hair under any circumstances. The crown prince did not even imagine that with the change of image, everything would happen exactly the opposite, and the ladies would still look at him. It was an amazing magic, and if the young man cut his hair, took off the ring and put it back on, it would grow back again. At that moment, a cafe employee approached them and brought the first toast she had ever made. Looking at the young man, she politely asked to try the new treat, and probably wanted to get his attention. This situation looked like flirting, because there was already a lot of food on the hero's table, but the lady still approached and addressed Ban specifically. It would be strange if no one hit on such a handsome gentleman, and this situation was not at all surprising. The toast she brought looked incredibly delicious and had the most perfect aroma. The young man admitted that he had not ordered this dish at all, but the lady offered to try it on the house. The prince asked the girl to remove the new dish, and since he had ordered something different, he did not appreciate something like that, because the lady offered him a special service. Ludia even managed to get upset that she didn't get to try the crispy, aromatic toast that looked incredibly good. But she understood that the prince was acting based on his own preferences and was not going to accept any other attention. Ban was sure that he had done the right thing, because if he had not refused, all the employees would have run up to their table right now. Ban looked incredibly smug, but for some reason he started to get on the girl's nerves. After a cozy cafe, they decided to take a walk along the local streets, and the crown prince invited the girl to try his favorite grape-flavored candy. He even bought grape juice in advance, and was sure that Lara would definitely like it. It wasn't about what the girl loved, but who she did it with, because that was incredibly important. It even seemed to Ludia that the young man had learned these phrases in some kind of flirting academy. She wondered if the position of crown prince must be stressful, but in some ways it was quite simple, not very chaotic or stressful. With this position, everything becomes crystal clear. There are people who are hostile to him, there are people who want to use him, and there are people who just want something. These kinds of people are easier to spot and deal with, but the prince immediately noticed that Ludia was different from them and treated him like a human being. She doesn't care at all whether he is the crown prince or a simple local resident from the street. Last year, his sister took the young man with her to the south, and the imperial court immediately panicked. Because they missed the official celebration, but it didn't really matter then, and there are plenty of others who can replace him. Then Ban even told them that they could take his place if they wanted. But unfortunately, he had been occupying this place for 10 long years in a row. He talked about it as if it was a trifle, but he felt a weight on his soul from his role. The crown prince was not the firstborn, not the son of the empress, and not even the child of a royal concubine. He was simply the son of an ordinary concubine. Hearing these words of the crown prince, the heroine thought for a moment, because she knew nothing about his life before. And she even thought that the young man was bragging, as if to see how capable and skillful he was. The heroine understood that the young man was communicating with her sincerely, and was really talking about the thoughts that were troubling him. He admitted that there was indeed a bit of bragging in his words, but he was in no way proud of it. He even laughed that sometimes it is useful to brag. It is completely normal, and it even refreshes the conversation. Suddenly, the young man asked what type of man the girl was attracted to, but she could only answer that someone definitely handsome. She had quite a lot of money, so really the guy just has to make some effort with her, and as for character, you can adapt as you go, as long as the person isn't too rude. Therefore, the heroine concluded that, basically, her ideal man should simply be handsome. And at that moment, the heroine herself realized that if someone should simply be beautiful, then Ban was ideal for her candidacy. She was even scared by her thoughts, and she understood perfectly well that Ban had an incredibly attractive appearance. They say that even beauty gets boring after 3 years, but to be honest, Ban looks like a person who can be admired endlessly. Unexpectedly, Ban confessed, and he thought for a long time, because their types overlapped a little. While they were walking down the street, they didn't even notice that one of the boys running past hit the girl hard in the back with his elbow. Ludia felt a little pain, but the first thing she was worried about was whether Banu had gotten it and whether he was completely okay, because the boy had also poured water on them. When the heroine received an elbow blow, she did not notice how the young man lost his footing, and the two of them flew into a huge fountain. But Banu didn't care at all about what was happening, and he only stated that he also loved beautiful people. Sitting in a street fountain, he took her hand and confessed that they were perfect for each other, and this was the most unusual statement that the heroine could not even imagine. People say that the life of a crown prince must be exhausting and busy, but in reality it was quite a simple routine. He wakes up at dawn to practice fencing on the training ground and trains diligently, speaks to visitors who have requested an audience, and listens carefully to each guest, treating them with respect. During the day, the crown prince receives reports from Caves, his longtime friend and loyal, devoted assistant. Because Kavez was so competent, even when there were tons of reports coming in, the crown prince would look through the smaller ones. But today was different. In the morning, when he was supposed to be working in his office, he was meeting with someone, and his sister was trying to find out what had happened to her brother and what had upset him so much. He only sighed at his sister's words, but she wanted him to finally open his heart and tell her everything. Everyone is scared because the crown prince has changed so much and no one understands what is happening. The young man said that, just as his sister had said, he had treated Ludia politely and spoken to her extremely kindly. Thanks to this, his mood was also not bad, but it seemed that Ludia was not pleased with this either. But despite this, the girl spoke to the crown prince politely and smiled, as if nothing bothered her at all. He asked the girl about her type and answered in a way that matched it, so he gave an answer in the same spirit. And as they sat together in the wet fountain, he admitted that they were perfect for each other. The next second, something completely unexpected happened, and the girl sighed heavily. And then she jumped out of the fountain and ran away without answering the crown prince. The sister was surprised that the lady simply left after these words, and they did not even finish their walk. Ban always trusted and followed his sister's advice, but this time the result was simply disastrous. It even seemed to him that her method was inappropriate or incorrect, but perhaps a little flawed. For some reason, Ludia left without saying a word, although she usually doesn't behave like that, and even her sister found it very strange. When she first saw Lady Ludia, she didn't seem at all uninterested in Bana, and she certainly had at least the slightest sympathy for the human. The sister was moved and asked her brother to be honest and admit what exactly he had done to Lady Ludia. She was sure that the young man was probably not saying something, because something in his behavior and words did not add up. She screamed for him to admit what exactly he had done to her, but the young man insisted that he had done nothing strange and that his eyes had simply been distracted for a second. Rihanna grabbed his cheeks like a little younger brother, but he continued to insist that nothing else happened after he confessed. But soon, the young man confessed that he hugged the girl around the neck, gently touching her hair, and after words of confession, kissed the girl right on the forehead, tenderly bending over her head. He finally confessed to his sister that he had kissed the young lady, and it was after this that she ran away from him, her heels flashing. The sister found out everything, and the kiss on the forehead probably seemed strange to her. In theory, this was considered normal, and even priests do it during nightly oaths. But it would probably come as a surprise to the girl. She had just had her coming-of-age ceremony, and being kissed by a guy she barely knew would be shocking. Ban, who previously looked at women as stones, rushes straight towards Ludia at lightning speed, but it was still strange, and for someone like Ludia, who spoke her mind, it was impossible to just leave without a word. Perhaps the girl had her own reason, but at that moment her fiancé approached her and asked what she was doing there. The young man immediately noticed the strange expression on the lady's face and immediately asked why she was looking at him like that. She suggested to her husband to kiss her right on the forehead and wanted to feel it on himself, and the young man was surprised. Should he really do it right there? And what he didn't understand most was why Rihanna suddenly started talking about kissing, because there was no talk about it. But if the princess wanted a kiss on the forehead, he promised that he would be happy to kiss her right now. The young man gently touched the girl's forehead with his lips, and Rihanna tried to understand what sensations she was experiencing. It wasn't particularly difficult for him, because he loved his wife madly, and a kiss on the forehead was also a sign of attention for him. And as soon as he kissed her, Rihanna realized that this was definitely some kind of trifle, and she would probably have to ask Ludia herself directly. She forbade her husband to come closer than 5 steps to the lady today, and this was a specific condition. Rihanna wanted to sort out all the details herself and suddenly looked in on Ludia, offering her apologies. At that moment, the girl was writing a letter to someone and admitted that she had not slept well the night before, so she was not putting much work into herself today. She wondered why Lady Rihanna had come here of all places and if she had heard anything from the Crown Prince. The girls wondered, and each of them was incredibly curious to know the details of the situations that had recently happened. Rihanna had immediately warned that she preferred to be direct rather than beat around the bush, and Ludia was even more reluctant to waste time. So Rihanna decided to ask directly what happened between the girl and Ban yesterday when they were walking. In fact, she knew that the two had met yesterday, and Rihanna also had quite good connections, so she had occasionally heard information about Ludia. She confessed, Ban has been sighing non-stop all day. Even she can't believe it and tried to ask what happened, but he didn't answer. Rihanna knew perfectly well that it was rude to come and ask about it directly, but since she was worried about her cousin, she ended up here before she realized it. She was worried, asking the girl about the event that happened yesterday because Ban probably did something wrong. The heroine replied that nothing special happened yesterday, and she doesn't think that Ban did wrong. But she still seemed unable to recover from the unexpected kiss and the closeness with the Crown Prince that she had never expected. Covering her face with her hands, the girl admitted that she was simply too ashamed, and she found no other option but to simply run away. Rihanna couldn't even imagine that everything happened exactly like this, and the lady was actually just embarrassed. Ban did indeed do something to her, but nothing strange happened, and the heroine simply panicked and ran away. But it was too late to apologize, and she realized her rudeness and wanted to apologize to him. Since he was the Crown Prince, it was not easy to go and see him, and when the lady said this, she was so excited that her throat even became dry. Now it finally became clear to Rihanna what the matter was, and why the girl decided to simply run away from Ban. She was silent for a while and soon turned to Ludia, who was still trying to understand the information she had received. Suddenly, the lady asked if she had ever thought about becoming a worthy, majestic empress one day. Just recently, the heroine's forehead was burning so badly, she was so confused that she completely forgot to warn Ban about Elian. Previously, she thought that Elian, who was chasing the crown prince, was pathetic and stupid, but now that she herself was in a strange relationship with him, she had no right to say anything. But on the other hand, to be honest, she felt some relief. At least he would not be connected with Elian's crimes and would not die unjustly. That was all she needed, and she didn't understand whether she liked the crown prince, nor did she expect anything to work out between them. She had already imagined how such an amazing man would become her lover, and this would be the best thing that could happen to her in this novel. These thoughts made the girl feel incredibly ashamed, because she knew very well that her best friend was in love with the crown prince. And she also has absolutely no desire to stop being Cinderella. She just wanted to avoid the death flags as soon as possible, move to a quiet village, and spend huge amounts of money enjoying a quiet life. But now she found herself in an awkward situation, where Rihanna was asking questions about whether she had ever thought about becoming an empress. She probably thought the heroine could answer that question easily, but it felt like another kind of death flag. So she answered my lady that the question she had just asked had turned out to be very dangerous. She also didn't understand what the heroine wanted to achieve, but suddenly Rihanna asked if Ludia remembered Lord Demuar. This was the same man who added some substance to the girl's glass and thereby tried to poison her. Ban deeply hates anything that involves cruel acts and has a special opinion on the matter. 3 years ago, Ban dealt with all the crimes, and most of it was finished about 2 years ago, or so everyone probably thought. Everything was calm until these events started to surface again, and the Crown Prince is now investigating this case, putting all his efforts into it. He definitely hated it, but he could go so far, almost to the point of overdoing it, with no control over the situation. And Rihanna was sure that he had already gone too far solely because of Ludia, who was almost poisoned by an unknown person. There are too many relatives in the imperial family. The ancient imperial family has created countless relatives, and in the process of dispersal of power has deepened. They tried to restore imperial power, but it was too late, and by that time their power had already gone beyond control. One of their families was desperately trying to lose power with her, and the other 2 ducal families were the same as their subordinate houses. This is why His Majesty the Emperor wants Ban to inherit the throne, since he has no relatives on his mother's side. And to become an emperor, he needs a worthy spouse, but he does not need power and influence at all. He needs someone who will not lie, but will support and love unconditionally. Looking at the heroine, Rihanna understood that Ludia was ideal for this candidate. If the lady promises to help Ban, then she also promises to help her in any matters, and in particular, to help her become empress. After this conversation, the girl could not find a place for herself for a long time, but one fine day she received a letter. The royal family cordially invited the girl to a charity auction, and everyone wanted to see a representative of the trading group. The invitation was special, and Ludia was surprised why she was invited to such an event, and the charity auction was held under the auspices of the royal family. But she wouldn't have even come if it weren't for the royal seal, and the girl simply had to be there. In fact, she was glad to receive such an invitation because it could open up new opportunities for her in the future. Elian had recently had a huge fight with her friend, and the girl thought about it for a long time. At first, she shouted at her loudly, but the next day it was as if nothing had happened, and she again hugged Ludia and hung on her all day. Elian also received an invitation to a charity auction and asked if her friend would be going. Since Ludia was the representative, they were obliged to go together, and it was even better this way because she could follow the girl and not allow her to act in secret. Or maybe Ludia just thought so, trying to cope with her, because lately it was completely unclear what to expect from her friend. She was acting quite persistently, and Ludia didn't understand if her behavior was really normal. But she remembered Rihanna's words, "If she helps Ban, then they will help her become empress." Liana knew nothing about this, and Ludia decided to ask her friend an unexpected question. She asked the lady what she thought the position of the great empress was in high society. Elian was sure that this was the highest position, and the empress was the one who stood above all others. The position every woman dreams of, equal power with His Majesty the Emperor, and no need to bow to anyone. After all, everything happens the other way around, and all people worship the venerable empress, respecting her honor and dignity. Ludia listened carefully to her friend's words, and now she was once again convinced of the greatness of this title. Elian didn't understand why her friend suddenly decided to find out about this, but she only modestly replied that she was just curious. She was not a stupid girl at all, and she suspected that her friend was hiding something and not telling the whole truth. As they headed to the palace, Ludia tried to figure out who had invited them to this event, as she didn't know a man named Harkrade Vaughn. The friend was outraged, because did Ludia really not know at all who this famous person was? She chuckled, because she was sure that she was quite ignorant in such things, and she wanted to explain everything right now. Harkrade Vaughn was the eldest son and heir of the Marquis of Turvan family, and was chosen by the Crown Prince at a young age to serve as his chief aide. But the most interesting part was that his family was one of the leading houses of the faction, meaning that the Crown Prince had appointed a key figure of the noble faction as his assistant. Harkrade Vaughn is completely loyal to the Crown Prince, so there are even strange rumors about them. Although no one knows what is really true and who is deceiving whom and who is setting up whom. One thing was clear: the man was extracting information by deceiving Ban, and Ban in turn was using the man to keep the noble faction under control. It was rather strange that it was he who sent the invitation to the girls, since none of them knew this man, and it is completely unknown for what reason he decided to invite the two of them, and there could definitely be something mysterious hidden in this. While the heroines were standing calmly in the corridor, they suddenly heard strange screams, as if someone suddenly felt better, or, on the contrary, suddenly felt worse. Next to them, they saw two strangers who began to sigh and shout joyfully at the unexpected news, as if they had been waiting for this moment their whole lives. One of them even said that now she could die the happiest person, and the girls were outraged by what was happening, as if the ladies had no manners. Ludia walked up to the sign that listed the items being auctioned by the royal family, and that was probably what caused the girls' reaction. But no one could understand what kind of object could cause such violent emotions that the ladies simply fell flat on the floor. Elian read the list carefully, and even to some extent considered it a disgrace to the nobility. But as soon as she read the last line, her opinion changed. And suddenly her reaction was as identical as the reaction of the two ladies, who were simply mad with joy. While her friend was in a dazed state, Ludia decided to go to the table and read for herself what was going on there. She glanced over the lines and didn't find anything unusual, but once she read to the end, she realized what was going on, because one of the items was a painting of the Crown Prince's naked torso, and it was just crazy. Whoever planned this definitely deserved a reward, and Ludia sat down next to her friend in the same woozy state. 2 days ago, the sister suggested this idea to the prince, and the young man was outraged. Why should he bare his torso? He was incredibly upset by the news that the portrait would have to be painted without a shirt, and even more so, other ladies would see it. Ban was clearly not thrilled with the idea, but his sister insisted that it was definitely worth doing. She suddenly asked if the young man did not want to marry Ludia, and this was the first conversation about marriage. The embarrassed prince did not know what to answer, and only asked why his sister decided to ask such questions. It was too early to talk about marriage, but the sister was sure that it was urgent to discuss it now, so that neither of them would have problems in the future. The young man understood that they were not going to leave him alone, but for him, this question was too serious, and he had to think about it. The health of His Majesty, the current emperor, was gradually deteriorating, and the succession to the throne was likely to happen very soon. The emperor was obliged to produce an heir, so a spouse was necessary. Unlike other princes who married as soon as they came of age, Ban did not even promise marriage to anyone. However, the spouse of the family is too powerful or too weak to help him, so the mayor's family may be a minor noble house, but they wield real power through the merchant group. The imperial faction is currently struggling under heavy military maintenance and expenses, but if Ludia can strike trade deals with the army, it might help. Then Ludia will have more influence on military affairs and will be able to build connections in military circles. With military power centered around Ludia, imperial power could finally be consolidated. The Crown Prince understood this, but Ludia would want to take this position, and generally take a high title. The lady was sure that she would probably refuse this offer, but they still had time. The lady had already spoken to Ludia about this matter and promised to become her empress if she supported the Crown Prince. Ludia valued these words very much, but she felt that the position was too high for her since she was an ordinary noblewoman. Perhaps the lady then stunned her by suddenly offering to take the place of the titled empress, and this caused fear in her. Therefore, Sister Bana was sure that a bold move was needed, and they had to think everything through thoroughly. Suddenly, the most daring idea came to her mind, and she asked the Crown Prince to seduce the girl so that she would quickly agree to become empress. Before she got married, she managed to seduce Cavus, and she did not understand what the reason was to seduce such a charming girl. There is not a single woman alive who would not succumb to the charm of the crown prince. She was sure the method would work. And the biggest plus, whether it's a man or a woman, everyone likes a little mystery and enigma. The prince did not understand what she was hinting at because the lady spoke partly in riddles, which the young man could not solve at all. She smiled and said, "Ludia is a beautiful, sweet girl, so if the prince takes off his clothes, she will definitely like it." She hit the nail on the head, and the portrait of His Highness the Crown Prince without a shirt caught the young lady's interest, but unfortunately, not only hers. There would definitely be a lot of competition for this position, and Ludia knew she couldn't spend too much money. The friend also wanted to acquire a portrait of the Crown Prince and was sure that it would belong exclusively to her. This certainly couldn't be what the heroine thought, but her friend didn't even hide her strong desire. And as soon as she learned about the nude portrait of the Crown Prince, a radiant smile appeared on her face. The two ladies who stood behind the heroine became furiously ablaze and angry because each of them wanted to get this item. Buying a portrait of a royal at the highest price means supporting that royal, and who knows how expensive a shirtless portrait of Ban would be. Ludia had only recently thought that she was not interested in the Empress's position, but her friend persuaded her to buy the portrait. Suddenly, a respectable lady in an exquisite red robe and a magnificent black corset appeared before the ladies, radiating genuine charm. When the girls saw her, Elian's eyes widened in surprise, because it was Berfonia Rottelfeld herself. Having seen this lady, the heroine now remembered exactly who she was because they had already managed to meet earlier. Berfonia was the eldest daughter of the famous Rotterfeld family, a house of fundamental merit. Her family was part of the noble faction and was trying to expand their power by absorbing the imperial faction, and this lady was the biggest lunatic in all of history. At that time, the only way for them to establish connections with the imperial family was to win over the still unmarried crown prince. Berfonia was chosen to fulfill the family's great ambitions because she possessed the most worthy qualities. The problem was that Berfonia had sincerely fallen in love with Ban and even tried to seduce the crown prince. She tried many times to invite him to a ball together, as well as to popular plays, but each time the young man categorically refused. And no matter how many times she approached him, the crown prince turned away and did not agree to any meetings, apologizing. After numerous refusals, Berfonia lost hope and her soul plunged into pitch darkness. She began to both obsessively love and deeply hate the crown prince, and her heart was filled with pain and suffering. After the female lead appeared in the original story and became close to the crown prince, the lady's hope was shattered into pieces. At one of the gala evenings, she saw the crown prince chatting sweetly with one of the girls. Berfonia even tried to harm him and the main character directly because she couldn't believe that her happiness was never destined to happen. In short, she was an improved version of Elian, and despite everything she did, she got off with exile rather than execution, thanks to the strong support of her family. Berfonia admitted that she was very pleased to meet Lady Mertens, and the heroine decided it would be better not to interfere and simply answer casually. These days, there was no one who didn't know the Astria trading group, and Berfonia had heard that Ludia was simply a genius in business. Therefore, she would like to become friends with her if she did not mind, and suggested that they immediately abandon the formality since the girls were the same age. Before Ludia could answer a word, her friend Elian blocked her path and turned to Berfonia. She admitted that she had not expected the ladies to participate in this auction at all, and had not seen them for a very long time. She also wondered why Berfonia had not been seen in society for a long time recently, and she almost thought that the girl had managed to get married. For that old count she once liked, and it was definitely a taunt from Elian. Berfonia laughed maliciously and only replied that Elian had too strange an opinion of her. Their relationship was probably bad in the original, but Ludia didn't think there was a scene with the two of them. The girls openly made fun of each other, and Berfonia even said that it was high time for Elian to settle down and stop causing trouble everywhere. They did not hesitate to quarrel right in front of the other ladies, and as expected, that was why everyone avoided them. So Ludia decided that she too should slip away before she got caught up in another scandal. Suddenly, Elian was indignant that Berfonia had just addressed her friend too familiarly, and she had not imagined it at all. She called the girl rude, outraged that she dared to pronounce her name without her permission. And does the family really teach its heirs to treat nobles from other houses so rudely? Ludia was outraged because her friend was dragging her into a quarrel right now and was acting too smug. Berfonia replied that a member of the county of Peliote was criticizing the upbringing of the Duke of Rotterfeld, and in her opinion this was simply ridiculous and absurd. But Elian only replied that with such an impressive upbringing, she would have been caught long ago when she made her way into the barracks of the Imperial Knights. These words made Berfonia incredibly angry, and she tried to justify herself by saying that such a thing had never happened. Ludia wondered if this girl had really once snuck into the barracks of other knights. She was up to the same absurd antics as Elian, and perhaps they were too similar, which is why they hated each other so much. Elian definitely had no sense of peace, and she stated that it was probably all rumors, but in fact, the rumors turned out to be just the horrible truth. Elian couldn't stop and continued to talk complete nonsense, and even wanted to remember the recent situation, but Ludia decided to stop her. She asked the girl to calm down because she was too excited and did not understand at all what she was saying. She also turned to Lady Berfonia and asked her to control herself, as this was not at all the behavior expected of a noble lady. The heroine would gladly just leave, but if they were left alone, these ladies would definitely fight and cause real chaos. At such moments, one can only switch attention, so the lady asked Berfonia if she had anything in mind for the charity auction. But probably it will not remain a mystery, and every lady would dream of buying a nude portrait of His Highness the Crown Prince. A lot of competition was expected, and Ludia understood that it would be very difficult to win. Berfonia was sure that she should try, and to be honest, it was not the picture that tempted her. And the prize for the winning bet is a wonderful day with His Highness the Crown Prince. And if Berfonia wanted to become Empress, such a level of investment was quite natural for her. A major quarrel was growing between the girls because each of them wanted to get what they cherished in principle and was absolutely sure of it. The heroine knew that Ayan was too quiet, but all this time she was thinking about the insidious plan that she was now going to implement. Elian asked her friend not to worry because it was solely her decision, but this was where the huge problem began. And just now, she brazenly challenged Berfonia that the main prize of the auction would go exclusively to her. The ladies agreed that they would see who would win, and Ludia was only glad that I had finally managed to get away from the scandal. But as soon as she walked away, a young man immediately approached her and wished the lady a good evening. He said that Her Highness was looking for a girl right now, and the heroine was surprised because this message was quite unexpected. And the young man should have said so, because the lady didn't even understand who they were talking about. He saw the surprise in the girl's eyes and realized that she was a little scared, so he hurried to tell her that he was looking for Lady Rihanna. He escorted Lydia to the luxurious carriage so that she could get to Lady Rihanna as quickly as possible. The heroine was very surprised because Rihanna was waiting for her right in the carriage and was incredibly happy about her appearance. She grabbed the girl by the hand and asked her to get into the carriage as quickly as possible because she probably wanted to talk to her about something important. Rihanna asked if the lady had a free minute, since the conversation was very urgent. She wanted to talk about the ad and admitted that the picture of His Highness the Crown Prince's naked torso was quite a bold move. Selling such a painting was not an easy task, and Ludia wondered if this was too much even for Ludia. So Rihanna planned a secret auction and asked not to worry too much because only the buyer would be able to see the piece. Still, the heroine thought it was a bit too much because could a secret auction really solve everything? The real auction was supposed to take place tomorrow, so Rihanna asked to just enjoy the party because it was organized by the imperial family and the atmosphere should be great. Ludia didn't understand. They left. The girl called her here exclusively for this purpose, to tell her that only its buyer would be able to see the painting. The girl had a feeling that this was not the only reason why the lady had called her here. In fact, she wanted to warn Lithia about the danger, because in this auction, everything was not so simple. This auction could be dangerous, but the heroine had no idea what she meant. Since everyone already knew about the main prize, Rihanna decided to tell the whole truth about the girl that could happen. People care more about the prize than the painting itself, but there is a more serious intention behind it. The prize, a painting of the prince's naked torso, is actually just a decoy. Recently, a large number of poisoned items were found in the Crown Prince's palace, but the culprits were already dead. Rihanna was sure that Ban himself had decided to become bait. If they tried to hush this up now, something terrible might happen next time. Ludia wondered if this prize was really meant to lure out the body of someone trying to harm the crown prince. In the Empire, especially the noble faction and other Ban brothers and sisters, are closely monitored every day to avoid assassinations. Therefore, Rihanna considered it necessary to warn Ludia about the possible danger, and the lady returned to the celebration with completely different feelings. Everything around seemed calm. Noble ladies and men were having pleasant conversations and having a good time. Rihanna was sure that in order to hide their true intentions, they needed to do something provocative. Countless crown princes had given their lives for the sake of pride, and Ban and she had done far worse things over the past decade to protect that position. Pride and shame are for a moment, but death is eternal, and if it comes, unfortunately, nothing can be done. But I really asked the girl not to worry too much and told her the whole truth, because I was sure she would be curious. Ludia didn't understand how she could not worry after hearing this, because she couldn't even imagine that such things were happening in noble families. She had previously said that she was not interested in the role of Empress, and she could not understand whether Rihanna had told her this on purpose to make her worry. At the celebration, the heroine's friend Elian approached her and asked what she was doing there. The girl had been looking for her for a long time and could not find her best friend anywhere among the crowd. Elian had 2 glasses of drink in her hands, and she happily offered her friend a drink. Ludia said that she doesn't drink strong drinks, but her friend insisted that it wasn't strong at all and was made from orange. Everything about the event looked like the guests were having incredible fun, but only Ludia knew what might be hidden behind that fun. Because Elian, with a happy face, called this party full of elegant butterflies. Looking at the guests, Ludia admitted that to her it all seemed like a gathering of night moths rather than beautiful butterflies. In response, her friend only laughed, but Ludia noticed that the girl was already quite drunk, although she said that the drink was not strong at all. But when the heroine took just one small sip, she realized that this drink was incredibly tasty. It was one of her friend's favorite drinks, and she really enjoyed the orange cocktail. Suddenly, the heroine caught herself thinking that for some reason she was communicating very nicely with her friend, although they had recently been arguing. Now, their communication was quite natural, and the girls had a normal conversation with each other. If you think about it, talking to Elian lately hasn't been that awkward. The heroine has been trying to let go of all her worries. Perhaps this happened because she began to treat her much better than before. But Ludia still couldn't completely relax, so she decided to drink the contents of the glass in one gulp. Previously, Elian treated her like a servant, and even at events, she constantly asked her to bring drinks. When she had drunk the full glass, her friend looked at her with frightened eyes and asked if she was okay. Ludia asked her not to worry about anything, assuring her that she was in a good mood and there was no reason to worry. She had just drunk a full glass of alcohol anyway, and Elian offered her friend some water. Her concern turned out to be too strange, and the girl ran headlong for a glass of water so that her friend would not get too drunk. Ludia didn't understand why the attitude towards her had changed so abruptly, and it was all too strange. So despite her fine behavior, the girl decided that she still had to remain on guard. After all, everything that was happening here was part of the contract, and she had no intention of falling under her friend's spell. When Elian returned, Ludia admitted that she was curious about something at this celebration. And now, she wanted to find out where and when her friend met Lady Burfonia, because it was obvious that these girls were familiar. It even seemed to her that they had known each other for too long, but she had never seen them together before. Elian admitted that Burfonia is her main rival in love, as she is also trying to get the attention of the crown prince. Elian called Burfonia a witch who always took away the guys she liked since childhood, and now the heroine understood the secret of their hostility. But as it turned out, it wasn't just about men. She took everything, people, things, wealth, whatever it was. And this time it seems that Burfonia's main target is Ludia, because it was no accident that the haughty lady was the first to speak to her. As soon as the friends began to talk, Lady Burfonia immediately approached them and asked them to call her by name. Grabbing her friend's hand tightly, Elian angrily asked what the girl wanted from Ludia this time. Burfonia put on an innocent face and admitted that she just wanted to be friends with Ludia, and there were no hidden meanings. She was sure that Elian should let her friend go because she seemed uncomfortable in this situation. Ludia was the girl's friend, and Elian was sure that she would not be bothered by anything like that. The lady asked Ludia to be honest because in her opinion, Elian was imposing herself and causing her some inconvenience. And the heroine did not expect at all that she would find herself between two fires, where her friend tried to forbid her from communicating with her rival. Ludia was not at all happy that these two continued to drag her into strange arguments that she did not need at all. So the heroine decided to take matters into her own hands and moved away from the girls to show that she had her own opinion. She stated that the ladies seemed close and that she had better leave as soon as possible so that a major quarrel would not escalate. Ludia did not want any showdown at all, and therefore tried to leave the company of two angry ladies as quickly as possible. Lady Ludia went outside. It was evening, and the stars were shining in the sky like scattered diamonds on a velvet canvas. When she was talking to Rihanna before the gala evening, the lady suggested having dinner together sometime and having a good time. She also said that if the girl needed help at today's party, she could come to the Western Lake. She was almost certain that this was not the kind of help the lady had in mind, but it was exactly what had helped her escape from these two now. As she approached the Western Lake, she saw that it seemed like there was absolutely no one there, and she was completely alone. There was a cozy white bench near the lake, and the heroine decided that now was the time to just sit and enjoy nature. The heroine thought that she could find someone who could help her, but she was glad that she was now completely alone. Help doesn't always have to come from people. Looking at the beautiful lake, she felt peace inside. She breathed in the cool air filled with the scent of blooming jasmine, and looking at the huge moon and the sparkling lake, she calmed down very quickly. The heroine just lacked privacy now. A beautiful view opened up before her, where nature merged with her peace of mind. She was completely sure that she was alone here, but suddenly someone's hand touched her tender shoulder. As if by magic, the crown prince appeared here and gave the girl a tender look. The young man apologized for keeping her waiting, but the people did not remember that they had agreed to meet. Probably Princess Rihanna told him where she would be, which is why Bon came to the Western Lake at a certain hour. He politely asked if he could sit next to the girl on the bench, and now the heroes were left in a secluded, beautiful place where only the moon illuminated them. The heroine really needed help from Ban or something like that, but she couldn't put all the pieces of what was happening together in her head yet. Maybe the princess just said that so that she would meet the crown prince, since it seems like they probably want Lithia to become the empress. Becoming an empress wouldn't be so bad if the heroine planned to live here forever, but if she took on this role and then returned to her original world, it would be simply terrible. She will probably be ashamed in front of the real heroine who will have to become the empress. Looking the girl straight in the eyes, the young man asked what people were thinking about right now. Embarrassed, she replied, her thoughts are completely chaotic now, and she thinks about many things every second. She was simply struck by how strange it was that they had met at all now, since she certainly didn't expect to see him here. In fact, the prince had a reason why he came here, and he was going to confess everything to the girl. After this phrase, he was silent for a moment, and Ludia continued to look into his bright ruby deep eyes. And with each passing second, she became more and more embarrassed, because the young man now looked very strange. The next day after the pleasant gala evening, the auction was finally supposed to take place, where it was necessary to choose the main winner and present him with the prize. But when she arrived at the auction, Ludia looked irritated and tense, and she had her own reasons for this. A friend noticed that Ludia looked very strange. The girl admitted that she hardly slept last night. Elian knew that she had gone out for a late walk the previous night, and this was not at all in character for her friend, since she wanted to know exactly where she was. Her friend was furious when she found out that Ludia was at the lake in a dress late at night, and it's no wonder she still looks tired. But the heroine knew that if Ban hadn't said something like that, it wouldn't have taken so long. Their conversation turned out to be quite sincere, and that evening the young man wanted to know who he was for Ludia. He was filled with a feeling of confusion and uncertainty, but he wanted to know the truth about how the girl felt about him. That night was special for both the crown prince and the heroine, because for the first time they had a sincere conversation. She still couldn't believe that the young man had actually said that, and all she could think about was that. Elian was worried that the auction was about to start, and if Berfonia managed to get the portrait of the crown prince, she would not survive it. Ludia admitted that when she saw the girls talking yesterday, it seemed to her that they got along quite well, and naturally, it was a joke. Elian didn't appreciate her humor and asked her not to say such disgusting things because she and Berfonia were real enemies. And she gets along well only with one noble girl, and that is her best friend, Ludia. Ludia tugged at her hand, which Elian was squeezing so tightly, because right now he still didn't want any closeness. In any case, Eliana was a little ashamed of yesterday, and this scandal attracted the attention of other ladies. And Elian also put her friend in a difficult situation for no reason, and she was fully aware of her guilt. There was definitely something wrong with this girl. She behaved so strangely that the heroine still couldn't get used to it. There was an awkward pause between them, but it didn't matter at all now, because the auction was about to begin. The host asked the participants to take their seats as quickly as possible, because the grand auction that everyone was waiting for would begin right now. Ludia knew that this event could end in anything, and inside she felt a little nervous about the unknown, because at stake was the image of a shirtless Ban. The sculpture of His Highness the First Prince was sold for 3,000 platinum coins, and Duke Molian, the father of the current empress, set the current record. The first prince, named Bolent, was confident that it looked like he would definitely be the first this year. But Ban was not exactly sure of this, because he knew perfectly well that victory would be exclusively on his side. It was too early to talk about it, and the hosts brought out the next auction lot covered with a white sheet. Bolent asked the crown prince to shut his mouth, calling him a filthy half-breed. The final item up for auction was a controversial portrait of His Highness the Crown Prince, and given its value, the painting will only be seen by the winning bidder. When the auction began, bidders began to bid very large amounts, and Bolent was surprised, not expecting this to happen. One lady even offered 3,500, and at the moment this was the largest amount. Other ladies who were very keen to get a portrait were very upset, because the participants offered incredible amounts of money. The next word was Burphonia's, and she made a bet of 4,000 coins. 4,000 platinum coins was a very large sum, and Elian, biting her fingers, thought that the girl had really gone crazy. To get ahead of her rival, she offered a whole 5,000 immediately after Burphonia's bet. The girls began to compete aggressively with each other, offering each other ever larger sums. And smiling, Burphonia offered a whole 6,820 platinum coins for the portrait of the crown prince. The participants began to whisper that such a record would not be broken under any circumstances, because it was a huge amount just for the painting. The host suggested repeating the stated amount 3 times so that the bidding would finally end. He announced the sum of Burphonia twice, expecting that one of the participants would be able to offer more. This was the last call. But suddenly a voice from the hall was heard, a girl who was going to buy the painting for as much as 10,000. Everyone present opened their mouths in surprise, because none of them expected that some painting would be sold for a huge amount of money. And this was the exact amount that Ludia offered, being sure that no one would offer more than she did. The lady paid the entire amount at once, and the victory was on her side, so immediately after the auction, she stood in front of that very portrait. The disappointed ladies left the auction, and a lady approached Ludia to ask about her impressions. Rihanna smiled and asked the girl what she thought of the painting she had just paid a fortune for. But Ludia was not at all pleased, because this picture turned out to be a real deception, and there was no talk of the crown prince's naked torso here. The painting featured a portrait of a girl, which was painted by the crown prince himself. But it turned out that there had never been a portrait of the prince, and Rihanna decided to leave it to Ludia's judgment. And if someone other than Mrs. Ludia had bought the painting, Rihanna admitted, the painting would have been lost along the way, and they would have simply returned the money. When they put out something so tempting that no one could resist, naturally nothing else caught their attention, and Ludia simply made the right choice. She probably didn't even consider the possibility that the girl wouldn't go to the Western Lake that night, and it turned out to be just a prank. Since the lady had acquired the painting, it meant that she was inevitably supporting the crown prince, and she had definitely done so herself. In fact, the young man came to the lake that evening for only one reason, which was known only to the two of them. At that time, Ludia could not even guess what this reason was, but it really turned out to be unusual and very pleasant. That day was a first for the heroine, because the young man asked her to draw her portrait, and she happily agreed. It was her first time modeling for a painting, especially in front of a man who cared about her at all. She felt as if someone else's gaze was taking her apart piece by piece, examining carefully every feature of her face, touching her delicate skin with its gaze. Perhaps it was this look that captivated her, and she could not tear her eyes away from the way Ban was drawing her. Because it was the young man himself, that secluded night, who looked like a masterpiece, captivating, alluring, in which you wanted to plunge and never let go. Rihanna admitted that buying the paintings could be seen as evidence that Ms. Ludia definitely has an interest in Mr. Ban. Suddenly the girl wondered what might happen if she suddenly decided to become the crown princess. At first, Rihanna didn't understand her question, and was very surprised when the lady suddenly said exactly those words. She wondered if she would be able to control Lady Rihanna if she became the crown princess. It was definitely a joke, and it wasn't that she hated it, she just wanted revenge for the prank with the portrait. After all, Ran had deliberately brought her to the lake and arranged a meeting with the prince, making sure that she could no longer escape. Rihanna didn't even deny it and was glad that her brilliant plan worked perfectly. And if Ludia needed a villain in this story, Rihanna was ready to become one, and even happily told the girl about it. She had been the only one protecting this child for over 20 years, and she was capable of doing worse, and was even ready to bear any guilt and was absolutely not against it. She was sure that one day the prince and Ludia would stand at the top of the empire and perhaps even want her head. But that definitely won't happen now, so Rihanna suggested simply postponing her revenge indefinitely. Ludia laughed and admitted that she just wanted to get revenge on the girl for what she did, and hearing Rihanna's words even felt some relief. The lady asked if Ludia was going to go and get her grand prize, but the girl had completely forgotten about it. Her thoughts were so preoccupied with the deceptive picture that she completely forgot that the main prize was a meeting with the crown prince himself. And since she had won the auction, the lady would soon be enjoying the bonus reward that every girl in the empire dreamed of. Lady Ludia, like a thin lily stalk, stood up straight in the middle of a blooming garden, inhaling the scent of roses and jasmine. Suddenly she heard the sound of approaching footsteps. Her heart began to pound wildly in her chest. She took a deep breath, straightened her shoulders. Fate seemed to stand still for a moment when the tall figure of Prince Ban appeared at the end of the alley. In the evening garden, on the very shore of the lake, where the silvery glare of the moon played on the dark water, Prince Ban captured the beauty of Lady Ludia on canvas. But for the prince, all these sounds and smells receded into the background, dissolving in the charm of her presence. There was a depth to the eyes that reflected the moonlight that Ban desperately tried to capture and convey on canvas. But the more he looked, the faster his heart beat, the harder it became to concentrate on work. One glance from her, a casual turn of her head, a slight smile that touched her lips, all this made him forget about everything in the world. The world he lived in before was full of people who hid their true intentions. All the people who surrounded the prince were only enemies with him or tried to use him given his high title. But Lady Ludia was completely different. There was not an ounce of falsehood in her, only sincerity, sometimes bordering on insolence, which simultaneously delighted and disarmed him. From the moment he first learned her name, from the first second he saw her gaze, he became incredibly interested in what kind of person she was. She constantly attracted his attention. There was some fragility in her, hidden behind a mask of confidence. And that very evening, when she asked him to prepare for an unknown event, he realized that this girl was definitely special. She was different from all the ladies of the court, whose false smiles and obsessive flattery had long since become boring to him. Even when they sat together in the fountain, dripping wet, she was a mystery he desperately wanted to solve, a treasure he dreamed of obtaining. Even cold and rational reasoning didn't help here, right up until the very moment when the pencil touched the paper, drawing her sweet portrait. Each pencil line became a feat. Because his hands were shaking with excitement, he tried to distract himself, to concentrate on technique, on the play of light and shadow, but all his efforts were in vain. Finally, that evening the portrait was finished. The girl posed as a model for the first time, so she felt very awkward. But for the prince, this moment was even more exciting, because every second he could not take his eyes off this unimaginable girl. Thoughts were running through his head that he wanted to have her, he wanted to take her with him, and most importantly, he wanted to be honest with himself. Therefore, when it was time for a date, the young man immediately admitted that he would like to continue to be close to this girl. He knew perfectly well what his presence next to her meant, but at some point he became greedy for feelings. And it was as if he could no longer imagine that he could be alone, without those crazy deep eyes and attractive charm. When he opened his eyes, he looked for the girl nearby, and when he found her, he wanted to come closer, although they had only known each other for a few days. He didn't even know who Ludia was to him, but he found the answer to this question and decided to ask her personally. Who is he to her? A man she would never be with, or a desired prince she is ready to be with? Ludia was incredibly embarrassed because she did not expect the meeting to be so frank, but the young man understood that there was nothing terrible about it. Their meeting would definitely not end there, but he only wanted it to always be continuous and eternity. And like the moon that appears in the sky every night, he would like this girl to appear before his eyes every day. This is the world from the original, and the heroine never thought about it seriously, and she didn't even know whether she liked the prince or not. And here there was absolutely no talk of any love, but she knew one thing for sure: she always trusts her feelings. The man who appeared before her one day stirred her heart and aroused the most tender feelings. She had put a lot into this painting and was sure that the young man had definitely understood her intention. The heroine asked him if he knew that if you get less than you invested, you will go broke in any case and end up a loser in the game of life. She gently touched the prince's face with her hands, her fingertips brushing against his soft skin. After all, for her this game was a losing one if her feelings were not shared and no one reciprocated. But for her our attention was even too much, and the warm fingers of her hands warmed his heart. The prince was cunning, and she was ready to accept it, and if her life was in danger, first of all she would save Ban by abandoning him. After a gentle touch, he promised that he was ready to protect her all her life, for as long as it took, no matter what. After all, he had already managed to buy the lady's feelings, so with complete confidence she was ready to surrender herself to him and spend the rest of her life with him. Ludia asked what she had heard. The young man had a lot of problems from military expenses. Perhaps these were just rumors, so the prince wanted to know from whom exactly the girl heard this information. She found out about it from Duchess Rihanna, and his sister turned him in again, but he asked her not to worry about it too much. Military expenditure was just the sort of area the lady could handle without any problem, as she had a lot of experience in it. If a trade guild enters into a contract with the army to supply iron ore, it can cut its current costs by almost half. And if you build large mansions and provide them to knights cheaply, then the problem of housing shortage can be solved. The prince wondered if this would be too burdensome for the merchant guild that belonged to Ludia, but as long as the empire doesn't disappear, the contract with the army can continue, so it's beneficial for the guild in the long run. Ludia never engaged in unprofitable business because the trade guild would have a reliable patron in the form of the army. After listening to her opinion, the prince admitted that the girl was overdoing it by offering such a lucrative offer. In order to expand the scope of the contract, she would later have to discuss the contractual issues with Marquis Bernhard himself. If it turns out that she is connected to the prince, it will look like pressure on partners in the negotiating process. So she suggested keeping their relationship a secret so that the deal with the Marquis would go smoothly. Secret affairs were not at all the prince's taste, but they still could not immediately officially declare it and admit it to everyone. The young man wanted to do this as soon as possible because right now he wanted to take the girl in his arms, put her in the carriage, and return to the palace together. And as soon as Ludia heard about this, her heart began to pound wildly in her chest because she clearly did not expect that everything would be decided so quickly. She was indignant that it was definitely impossible to do this now because everyone would see, and many rumors would appear that could harm the hereditary principle. But Ban insisted that this decision would be the best, and he was ready to take her to his palace right now. If rumors spread, Elian and Berfonia would definitely want to kill her, and so far the girl didn't see anything good in that. So she tried to insist that it was inconvenient now and wanted the prince to wait a little extra time. In that case, their engagement would be postponed, or the idea was surprising: was the prince really going to announce the engagement as soon as possible? He thought it would be good to hold the engagement in 3 months at the founding celebration. This seemed a little hasty to the girl, and agreeing with her, the young man suggested that they later thoroughly discuss the schedule and other circumstances. For now, there was something more important that the young man needed to take care of, but the girl didn't know anything about it yet. His hot lips touched her hand, and the surprised lady looked at the first kiss of the venerable gentleman. Since they had already met today, it was unknown when they would see each other again, so the young man wanted to take a good look right now. Ludia didn't understand how it was possible to change so drastically just because they had just started dating today. But she didn't remember Ban ever saying anything about a relationship, and at that moment Ludia stopped. First of all, there was one more thing that needed to be clarified, because how can you become a couple if no one has asked you out? They talked about secret affairs, about engagement, but they never said exactly what kind of relationship they had. So while they were not together, Ludia asked Bond to tell her what kind of relationship they would have from now on. He was a little perplexed, because all the pieces of the puzzle fit together in his head, and he clearly understood what connected them. He was overcome with incredible embarrassment, and he even turned his head away from the girl, trying to find the right words. He said all sorts of sweet words to her, but now he couldn't say what kind of relationship they had, and this even amused Lydia. And now the moment had come when the prince had to make an official statement. He called her name softly, but as soon as he began to speak, his ears turned so red that they became bright purple. He said the first letters of the word meet, but he just couldn't finish it while Ludia laughed at his embarrassment. The young man pulled himself together, because it was the first time he had made such a proposal, and gathering all his will into a fist, he suggested that the girl start a relationship. He only said half a word, but Ludia decided to support him and help him propose, because she was incredibly tired of waiting. Today she decided to confess first, and the proposal was made as expected. Ban was incredibly happy, and every cell of his soul seemed to flutter when he heard the main words in his life. The next day after meeting the prince, Elian immediately visited her friend to wish her good morning. Ludia was busy with important papers that needed to be sorted out. She greeted the lady with a sullen face. She knew that she had come for a reason, because everyone knew that Ludia had won the main prize at the auction. The heroine's head kept flashing with the words spoken by Ban about how it was unknown when they would be able to see each other again. Ludia was a man of few words, but her friend complained that she didn't want to know all the details, since the portrait of the crown prince's naked torso was the only one she got. No one knew what was actually drawn there, but Elian probably really wanted to see it. She begged her friend to tell her what His Highness's body was like, and tearfully asked to see it at least once. For the sake of the dignity of His Highness the Crown Prince, the heroine was not going to show the portrait, because she was warned that only the one who won the auction would be able to see it. She wasn't going to tell him that such a picture never existed, but her friend pounded the table with her fists and called her a pest. Elian was sure that Ludia had to show her the portrait, since they had been friends for a long time. The heroine was outraged that the girl called herself a friend, but dumped all the work on her and came too late. So she angrily slammed the table and ordered the girl to go to work, and to do it as quickly as possible. The lady did not expect at all that her friend would behave like this and defend her opinion, asking where she was going to go. The heroine was about to go on business, and she didn't want to go into details. She quickly got into a luxurious snow-white carriage to go meet the prince. Now that she was officially dating him, she didn't have to worry about her life at all, being caught up in Liana's affairs. And even communicating with her friend became much easier for her because she could tell her everything, not the way it was before. Soon the carriage arrived at the right place, and opening the door, the girl admired the luxury of the place in which she found herself. It was the largest jewelry store in the capital, known to every girl in the empire. Ludia slowly opened the door, and to her great surprise, a man was already greeting her as an honored guest. It was the deputy manager of a jewelry store, and this noble gentleman's name was Burble. He asked what the girl had come for, and Ludia was going to buy the most expensive ruby today. After purchasing it, she planned to process it separately and give it as a gift, and in that case, the man was going to show the rubies that were not sent to jewelry. He politely asked the girl to follow him, intending to take her to the second floor. They sat down at a tea table where a jewelry store employee thoughtfully presented them with sweets and expensive aromatic tea. The gentleman asked the lady to bring samples of rubies that were sold in their shop. He was glad that the lady had dropped by their jewelry store, as it sold the best quality gems in the empire. Passing by, the heroine noticed that this store really had a lot of high-quality stones, because she knew a lot about jewelry. It was not for nothing that Ludia ran the trading guild, and as soon as the master heard that she was his head, his mouth opened in surprise. On an expensive porcelain tray, the lady presented samples of precious rubies that the gentleman had requested. All the stones that the jewelry shop sold were of the highest quality, but among them, these rubies were the best. Therefore, the gentleman confidently declared that these would be the ones that would suit the head of the trading guild, opening the largest box and showing the sparkling stones. Ludia began to stare at the huge precious rubies, studying every tiny detail. She was looking for a deep red color like the prince's eyes and said she would like to get a different shade. But to get a more saturated color, you need to use magic for special processing. The gentleman admitted that the master who does this kind of processing is quite moral, and it is too difficult to come to an agreement with him. And that very master he was talking about was the cutie Teferi Akalar, whom the heroine had already met once. So after visiting the jewelry store, I decided to go to the magic tower to figure it out myself. She asked for help with processing the jewelry and approached the master personally, hoping that she would help her. The heroine heard that there is a way to process stones with magic so that they acquire a completely different shade. Teferi asked to see the stones herself and let her know what she could do with them. She extended her little hand, but the heroine got a little confused, extending her hand to her, and the little girl screamed that it was not a jewel at all. Ludia understood what the girl was asking of her and asked her to wait for a while, taking out the precious box. In this box lay the largest ruby she had ever managed to buy in a jewelry store. She said she wanted to have the ruby treated to a darker red to achieve the desired hue. With just one snap of his fingers, the Master of Magic managed to change the color of the huge stone, and the heroine was incredibly surprised. The artist changed the color temporarily, but it will take some time to change it permanently. The heroine would still like to get a darker color, but such a shade requires more magical power. More precisely, processing such a stone will simply cost more money because the craftsman will put in more effort. To get the rich color the heroine wants, you'll have to pay about 3 times the cost of the stone. The heroine had recently had a big expense due to an auction, and she was disappointed that she would have to spend a lot of money again. Last time, Ludia gave her guarantee, so the master agreed to do this work for free. Ludia, delighted, could not believe her happiness, but still suspected that the master was trying to deceive her. The girl could not understand why this stone needed to be processed, since it was already good enough and did not need any changes at all. The heroine said that she would like to give the ruby to one person, which is why she is trying so hard. She made no secret of the fact that she wanted to give the stone to Banu, and wanted the ruby to be similar in color to his eyes. Teferi didn't understand why the lady was going to give this particular gift, and judging by her face, she was unhappy. Therefore, the master cancelled her consent for processing, and the heroine, who had been happy a couple of seconds ago, now did not understand what was happening. The girl said that this stone could not be processed, and asked the heroine to return home as soon as possible. Probably the master didn't like the crown prince at all, and she refused solely for this reason. The heroine sighed because she didn't even understand him, that she fell in love with the most sinful man. Sighing heavily, she still sat opposite Teferi, who stubbornly remained silent. But after a couple of minutes, she admitted that if the lady really wanted it, she could process the stone. The heroine even asked if this was true, because she was not at all sure that the master would not change his mind in a couple of seconds. She asked what was good about this insensitive man, since there were completely bad words being said about him. Hearing these words, the heroine could not believe that the prince could be insensitive, because the soul of this man is incredibly beautiful. And rather the opposite. Sometimes she was even embarrassed by how rich this man's feelings were. Teferi thought about it because it was the first time she had heard such warm words about the prince, although she was sure that she knew absolutely everything about this guy. She assumed that because of the strange aura emanating from Ludia, the young man began to behave completely differently. Indeed, there were many interesting things happening around Ludia, and the master who controlled the magic could not possibly be mistaken. She suggested finishing the stone and handing it over this week, asking that the ruby be left in the magic tower for now. Patting the heroine on the shoulder, the girl said strange words, that there are many good things in life, and asked the heroine to be sad, and also to hold on and live with all her might. Suddenly, Teferi offered the lady to become attached to her if the heroine had a desire to possess magical powers. But in response to this, the heroine asked to pinch the baby on the cheek. At least once, the video hand was reaching straight to her face. Touching the cheek of the sweet girl with a frowning face, who turned out to be soft and gentle, Ludia was simply delighted. She barely managed to hide her displeasure, and after a couple of seconds, asked the heroine not to bother her sweet face anymore, and to leave. But this was enough for Ludia, because she managed to persuade the main master of the magic tower to pinch her on the cheek. When Leda left the magic tower, she still couldn't believe that the master allowed this to happen. The girl was probably still unhappy because the heroine only managed to pinch her cheek once, and it was probably too cruel for her. Returning home, Ludia understood that she needed to finish the accumulated tasks that could not be left until tomorrow. When she entered the palace, she heard loud shouts and someone was talking rudely to her friend, asking what she was going to do. As soon as Elian saw Ludia enter, she looked at her with frightened eyes, as two young men were standing in front of her. The friend hid behind Ludia's back. She had absolutely no idea what had happened here while she was away. The man was shouting loudly about the Merchant Guild representative, and for some reason he was incredibly angry. Ludia replied that she was coming with a representative, asking what kind of young men dared to come to her palace. One of them immediately took a business card out of his pocket, so that the lady would understand who she was dealing with. The piece of paper stated that he was Mr. Count Beckentor, and Ludia tried to act very carefully in this conversation. She admitted that she was the only daughter of the Viscount House of Mertens, but the young man angrily declared that he had not asked about this at all. He started shaking some papers in front of the heroine's face and asked how she was going to compensate. Looking at the paper, Ludia realized that there was something written there about the results of a geological examination. Due to the fact that the Merchant Guild was mining ore in the mine, the soil in the lands had weakened to the point that it could collapse at any moment. Therefore, the man angrily asked to immediately close the mine. Otherwise, he promised to demand full compensation for damage to the land. Ludia tried to understand where the research was conducted, and the Count insisted that everything took place at the Imperial University. 2 years ago, she received permission from the Imperial University and began developing the mines, and until last year there were no complaints. But now suddenly problems have arisen. She also noticed that the name of the research approval officer was blank on these documents. So she tried to understand who discovered the anomaly in the lands and approved the research, but the man shouted that the girl didn't need to know this. Ludia replied that until the man named the commissioner, they could not take any action. Since loud voices were heard from the office, the knights came to the rescue and wanted to figure out what was going on here. As soon as the Count saw the young men entering, he immediately stopped shouting angrily because he understood that problems could follow. This time he decided to retreat, but warned Ludia to be careful next time. She had no intention of leaving information that the lands of Beckentor could collapse because of the mine, and she couldn't leave that information just like that. The Count was sure that the girl would talk about compensation, since it was for her that he came here. But the heroine wanted a different solution and promised to ask the patron of the Marquis Romain to conduct a re-examination of the mine. As a result, she promised to either pay compensation and close the mine, or demand responsibility for threatening the guild with false blackmail. Immediately after the Count left, Elian said happily that her friend was like a prince on a white horse. She asked the lady to speak more quietly, since she was also a representative of the guild and had to resolve such matters calmly, without hysterics. When she saw the Count, Elian was simply scared because he was a tall and scary man, but her friend asked her to calmly sort everything out. Showing a map of the Beckentor lands, the girl indicated that the mine was located under a certain mountain. Until this mountain collapses, the probability of the adit being scalded is negligible, and the heroine was absolutely sure of this. Besides, she always put safety first, but for some reason the results of the geological examination changed after 2 years. Recently, there was a major collapse on the opposite side of their mine, and many newspapers wrote about it. It seems that the accident happened in a newly built mine, which belonged to Count Beckentor. None of the girls could figure out exactly what was going on, but perhaps the Count had attacked them because of compensation for the collapse of his mine. Anything was possible, but Ludia wanted to get to the bottom of what happened because she hated false accusations. If the Count's claims are accepted, the mine will temporarily come under his jurisdiction, since it was he who ordered the study and received the report. Ludia was sure that while the investigation was ongoing, they should not give up the income from the mine, and the longer the investigation dragged on, the greater the losses they could expect. By thus delaying the investigation, the Count wanted to force them to give up their right to their own mine, and this was his grand plan. Count Beckentor simply left, and Elian was sure that after that there would definitely be no more problems. But if that report is not a fake, then there really is someone who approved such a study. And there was one person at the Imperial University that the heroine thought of who could definitely take part in this. She turned to the master of the magic tower, returning an hour later, and the girl even wondered if something had happened. When the heroine told about what happened, the master was indignant because she had dragged her here for complete nonsense. Teferi probably has acquaintances at the imperial level of the university because she has already lived in this world for more than 200 years. It was not for nothing that she turned to her, because in the case of geological research she knew one person very well. The master only named one name, Seekman Rosalind, and after thinking about it, the heroine realized that she had probably heard this name somewhere before. And we were talking about a respectable man, the rector of the Imperial University, the most famous man in the empire. The heroine went straight to the rector of the university, and Ludia could not believe that one could just come to him without warning. The girls entered the mistress's office, and the master loudly called her name, Rosalind, and they had probably had some common business before. The noble lady turned around and saw Teferi, and she immediately recognized her voice without fail. The girl loudly declared that everyone should leave the office immediately because she needed to talk to Rosalind right now. Ludia was worried that Teferi was being too harsh, since this lady was a respected person in the empire. But no one even dared to disobey the master's words, and the university staff, bowing low, immediately left the office. The master and Rosalind had seen each other just last month, but the noble lady seemed to have not seen her for 1,000 years. She turned to Ludia because she really saw this lady for the first time and really wanted to know who she was. The heroine gave her name and said that she was the head of the trading company Astria, known throughout the empire. Rector Rosalind recognized her immediately and politely asked the guests to sit down in the comfortable chairs to begin a conversation. The master immediately got down to business and stated that Mrs. Ludia wanted to ask the rector for help. The rector was surprised why such a fragile and sweet lady needed bombs, because she hadn't even said anything about them yet. The heroine asked to meet with a geology expert, but Rosalind started talking about bombs, and explosives, as it turned out, were her specialty. To blow something up properly, you need to have a good understanding of the terrain, so Rosalind was quite competent in this matter. Rosalind felt embarrassed because the master called her an expert after always calling her untalented and an upstart. The master was sure that no one could compare to her knowledge after living only 50 years, but Rosalind said the opposite, and a long existence on Earth does not automatically make a person smarter or wiser. Rosalind laughed when she saw the girl's angry face and declared that she had not been talking about her at all. Ludia tried to calm Teferi down and asked her not to shout, but she was too hot-tempered and would get angry literally at the drop of a hat. Rosalind found Ludia amusing and asked her why she had come, and the lady wanted to meet a geologist to test the stability and suitability for production of one of the mines owned by her company. The heroine said that the research was conducted before digging the tunnel 2 years ago, but the heroine said that now someone doubted the safety of the mine. Looking at the documents, Rosalind realized that the re-examination had shown that the soil had suddenly become dangerous. The rector confirmed that the person who carried out the recheck no longer worked at the university, but Ludia wanted to know the name of the person in charge. Rosalind said that last year the man made a mistake during the examination stage, which led to an accident with casualties. For this, he was expelled from academic circles, which means that the report is complete nonsense. But now Ludia could not understand how the report had been approved and given the university's seal, and the rector had the same question. After thinking for a moment, Rosalind realized that the master knew well the man who had approved the document. It turned out to be a young man named Jacques Setorin, and upon hearing his name, the master broke into a malicious smile. Things turned out to be much worse than the master had imagined, and Ludia still couldn't understand what was going on here. A magical golden ring appeared above the girl's head, and she stared straight into its center. She promised to let me know as soon as she found this man, because it was now that she gave the signal for him to be found as soon as possible. The master asked Rosalind to figure out how the report had received the university seal, but everyone knew perfectly well that it could not be allowed to damage the university's reputation. She promised to sort everything out as quickly as possible, and after returning the documents to the lady, asked her to remain calm. Ludia didn't even believe that her problem could be solved so quickly, because the master suggested the right person. Rosalind said that tomorrow at the Imperial University there will be a presentation of reports and an award ceremony. That's why she invited the heroine to attend such an important event, and the girl was very surprised. The rector promised to introduce Ludia to several geology specialists, and perhaps they would be better suited for this test. Things were going better than the girl expected, so Ludia promised to come right after work, and it looked like the issue with the mine would be resolved without any unnecessary problems. After meeting with the lady, the Count was furious because he was sure that the matter should go smoothly. And now he needed to report to one lady who was going to carry out the insidious plan. The mother of the second prince, named O'Connell Huvie, angrily asked the Count that he could not even do this easy task. Justification was the lot of losers, and the Count, afraid to raise his eyes to his mistress, asked her for forgiveness. The lady understood that this would create inconvenience, because she had to report some result. The Count asked for another chance and vowed that this time he would do everything right. But if he wasn't even capable of such a simple task, the lady didn't understand how he could be entrusted with other tasks at all. There was a hint of threat in the lady's words, and as soon as she said his name, beads of sweat began to run down the man's face. His Majesty did not have much time left, and soon he was to pass away to another world, and everyone knew this. And when this happens, the throne, despite his lowly origin, will go to Crown Prince Berthasselin, so the mother of the second prince could not just sit idly by while another prince could become emperor. She had already paid attention to Ludia from the Mertens house, who had become popular in Soviet circles. This person was honored by the attention of Princess Rihanna herself, who supports the Crown Prince, and Huvie knew this very well. This meant that the main target was only she, and the Count needed to deal with her as soon as possible. The lady hoped that the Count had heard her words perfectly, because he no longer had the right to make a mistake. And she didn't understand why the Count couldn't deal with the girl, missing out on a wonderful opportunity to destroy her. Stepping on his hand with her sharp heel, she declared that they had absolutely no time left for empty talk. After all, it was the Count who came to her, begging to be allowed to serve, so he should have shown an excellent result. But he failed even with an easy task. The lady said that if he succeeded, her son would ascend the throne, in which case his family would shine much brighter than it does now. Next to them stood the second prince, named Delphor, who agreed with every word of his mother and never dared to contradict her. She inquired about the preparations for the founding festival, and the young man made every effort to live up to her expectations. The lady squeezed the young gentleman's shoulder so much that it even hurt when the conversation turned to her expectations. After all, she had already told the young man many times not to show her that pathetic face, which irritated her incredibly. The young man asked for forgiveness, being completely under the supervision of his mother, who managed all affairs. Delphort said that he had a lot of things to do, so he should go, and the conversation with his mother turned out to be very tense. When the young man came out, the Count was still sitting on his knees in front of his lady, squeezing his hand, which she had almost pierced with a cloud. The prince's second mother was an incredibly formidable lady, and she really wanted her son to become emperor. It was a battle where people risked their lives, and each of them could be in the crosshairs at any moment. Therefore, the lady offered the Count to risk his life to destroy Ludia Mertens forever. He stated that this was now his only task, and he was obliged to cope with it so that his family could live in luxury. Lady Rihanna was also aware of all the latest events and immediately received new information. The young man reported that after Count Beckentor's visit to the trading company, he met with O'Connell's concubine and then left. The timing of his visit was suspicious, and was the concubine also trying to take over the trading company? Rihanna understood that there was no direct benefit in this now, and there was no need to tell His Highness the Crown Prince about it. That's why she asked to simply inform Cavis and let Ban find out everything naturally, because no matter how hard he tried, Count Beckentor would not be able to destroy the trade guild overnight. She also asked to strengthen the First Prince's security, and recently he has become more active in military matters. This man was quite suspicious, but nevertheless, in this situation it was simply necessary. The young man obediently accepted all the instructions of the mistress, and each time he followed the instructions strictly. Rihanna understood that Ludia's contribution was extremely important to win this game, although she herself might not even realize it. But the dice have already been cast. All that remains is to wait and see what actions the people around them will take. A few days later, Lady Ludia was trying on a dress to prepare for a special event. She asked the maid for advice, but after looking at the lady's dress, she declared that it was not at all suitable for the University Awards ceremony. For the lady, choosing a dress was quite a difficult event because she had never been to a University Awards ceremony. The maid suggested choosing a dress that was more elegant and simple, but it was too plain for Ludia. But the lady added a luxurious decoration to it, and after that the dress began to play with different colors. None of them had been to such ceremonies before, but they all knew it had to be neither too elaborate nor too modest. Plus, this dress went perfectly with the mistress's silver hair, and the maid was incredibly pleased with this choice. Suddenly, a voice was heard, which announced that it was time for Miss to leave because the ceremony would soon begin. Ludia couldn't be late, but she was too relaxed this morning, so she grabbed her dress and ran to put it on. Luckily, she was not late, and the guests were just beginning to gather for the awards ceremony. Ludia looked incredibly elegant in a black velvet dress with gray patterns. Celebrities from all over the world, the Minister of Finance, the Commander of the Legions, and even representatives of trading houses gathered here. It is unlikely that they came for the presentation of the dissertation, and most likely all the guests came for the socializing. But the lady knew absolutely no one here, and she cautiously walked into the hall, looking around. At that moment, Rector Rosalind approached her and informed her that the girl had arrived just in time. After looking at Ludia, Rosalind became silent for a bit, and Ludia was even more frightened that she looked somehow strange. She began to get nervous that her outfit was inappropriate for the occasion, but Rosalind replied that that was not the case at all. And now it became clear to her why Master Teferi had set her sights on her, although Ludia herself did not suspect anything. This means that Ludia is simply beautiful, because Teferi secretly pays a lot of attention to other people's appearance. Rector Rosalind asked Lydia to sit at the round table as the ceremony was about to begin. This lady turned out to be surprisingly caring, and even suggested that the heroine get comfortable and feel at ease. Rosalind had to attend presentations and award ceremonies, so she couldn't stay with the heroine now, but she promised to return soon, asking to wait a little while the main ceremony took place. Ludia wished Rosalind good luck with the event, and they were supposed to see each other again soon. Be that as it may, no one paid attention to Ludia, and no one whispered behind her back. All the guests were busy talking, and no one cared about the stupid gossip that constantly haunted the girl. Since such a brilliant society had gathered here, the heroine thought about expanding her connections a little, and was ready for new acquaintances. Next to her sat a noble lady, who turned her attention to Lydia, who sat down next to her. The lady was a representative of the Sagaret trading house, and was probably known to the Lady Empire. Seeing this girl, the heroine immediately remembered her, because this woman participated in the auction of the portrait of the Crown Prince. She asked to be called simply Lady Sagaret, and she was the first woman the heroine managed to communicate with. In any case, she was impressed again, because it was Ludia who put 10,000 platinum coins up for auction, and it really was a bit over the top then. The lady asked the girl if she liked the painting, for which she had paid a very large sum. Probably this was her goal, to find out what was painted on the portrait, because everyone wanted to buy it. Ludia stated that the painting was lost and that everyone already knew about it, so she never saw the portrait. The woman admitted that even she was very sorry for the amount spent, because the money was simply wasted. It was a relief for the heroine, because she was afraid that this woman would become fixated on the portrait like her friend, given her activity at the auction. Ludia said that the imperial family offered to return the money, but she refused and decided that everything was fine. The woman was surprised, because this meant that Ludia turned out to be a real player who always achieves her goal. After all, in the end, what was important to her was not the painting, but the opportunity to become indebted to the imperial family, and the lady was absolutely sure of this. In fact, the lady simply paid the money as a reward for the portrait that Ben had painted, but no one else knew the details. Only a few knew the woman's full name, including her last name, and she only called her by it to those she recognized. The fire shook the heroine's hand. She declared that Ludia definitely deserved it, but the heroine admitted that the lady was simply flattering her. The woman looked forward to the young lady's growth and admitted that if she ever needed help, she would definitely remember her. Probably the lady imagined too many good things for herself, but for Ludia now this was only a plus. Explaining that things didn't work out that way was also strange, so now she decided to choose a different tactic. The host announced the beginning of the ceremony, and complete silence reigned in the hall, and the guests watched the upcoming event with attention. The inspired heroine clapped her hands, because for the first time she was present with completely different people. Rosalind expressed her gratitude for attending the Imperial University Awards ceremony. The rector began her main speech, and diagrams and symbols appeared on the magic screen, confirming every word she said. There was to be a reception after the awards ceremony, and Rosalind admitted that the university team would be grateful if the guests would honor them with their presence. After the speech, the rector immediately approached Lydia and asked if she looked impressive in her official position. The girl admitted that Rosalind seemed like a completely different person, strict and worthy of respect. At that moment, the dean of the university unexpectedly approached them and asked the rector to pay attention. The young man whispered something in her ear, and the rector's expression instantly changed to a more serious one. Rosalind apologized as something had just happened, and Lydia politely thanked her for the opportunity to attend such an event. Her words that something serious seemed to have happened caused alarm in the heroine's soul, and now she was left alone with two noble young men sitting opposite her, who for some reason were looking intently at the heroine. Lady Sagaret was shocked at how the girl managed to tame Dean Rosalind, because everyone compared her to an enraged wyvern. And no one had ever seen her so submissive before, because Rosalind had just been having a pleasant conversation with the heroine. Lydia didn't know that Dean Rosalind had such an angry reputation, because in her opinion, this lady was very kind and sympathetic. But it's not for nothing that she was called a wyvern. She is extremely cold in communication with people, and some even call her a cold-blooded witch. So everyone was surprised that a person like Rosalind was communicating with Miss Lydia in a warm and friendly manner. From the very beginning, the rector had not been cold with her, and after these words the heroine felt strangely unpleasant because it seemed that someone was trying to denigrate Rosaline. Lydia stated that she does not pay attention to rumors when dealing with people, but only believes what she sees with her own eyes, because rumors tend to exaggerate. That's why the heroine no longer wanted to hear negative assessments about Rosalind, because no one knew what she really was like. Besides, if you want to run a trading company, you need to be able to distinguish truth from fiction. Mrs. Sagaret looked at the lady with narrowed eyes and only sarcastically agreed with her opinion. But she thought completely differently and was only trying to win the young lady over. Everyone would probably think Lydia was a bore now, but she wasn't going to follow anyone else's lead and stand up for her own opinion. After the conversation, an unfamiliar young man approached the girl and tried to start an unexpected conversation with her. This young man turned out to be the second son of a Marquis family of Boldras named Jurad, and his smile was too false. The heroine was surprised that he knew her, and the young man admitted that recently people had shown great interest in the trading company and its owner. In addition, their family also played a huge role as matchmakers for the Mertens family in the past. Lydia heard about this for the first time, and her surprise knew no bounds as soon as she learned this information. The young man apologized because his words were probably too sudden, and her too joyful smile only caused disgust. He didn't seem like a bad person, but for some reason, Lydia was now starting to get incredibly stressed out by all of this. Perhaps he was familiar with people with a geological background, but for some reason the heroine did not want to communicate with him at all. So she decided no matter what, it would be better to ask someone else and not enter into a conversation with this strange young man. Looking carefully at those present, Lydia realized that she had absolutely no other options. And maybe now she just needed to be more patient, and she just wanted to see Rosaline. Noticing the concern on the girl's face, the young man asked if she was worried about something. The heroine felt too picky and admitted that she was actually looking for a person who understood geology. But there were no such people in her circle, and the young gentleman said that if she needed a geologist, he knew one worthy person. And it looks like Lydia will come to communicate with these young men, because now, first of all, she needed connections. He spoke about Professor Rodelia, his former mentor, who had long specialized in geology. He even offered to get to know each other if Lydia didn't mind, and right now it was just to her advantage. She asked where Professor Rodelia was now, and the young man politely asked her to follow him. As it turned out, she was able to find a geologist very easily, and Lydia did not even expect it, but she was glad that she simply asked and was not embarrassed. The young man asked to wait a minute to tell the lady about his new acquaintance. He approached one of the ladies sitting at the next table and probably told her about a girl who wanted to meet her. When the lady saw Lydia, she smiled sweetly and was pleased to meet her, and she also asked the girl to call her simply Rodelia. The eldest daughter of the Mertens family bowed respectfully and introduced herself to the representatives of the Astria Trading Company. Not wanting formal negotiations, the heroine also asked to simply call her by name in order to immediately move on to more friendly communication. Radelia heard that the girl was looking for a geologist, and she also wanted to clarify some important information. Ludia said that they had been informed that the trading company's mine was threatened by ground instability and that she would like to re-examine the location. 2 years ago, no problems were found during the first check, but recently the results changed, and the mouth also knew about it. The Ludian Trade Guild didn't even use explosives to mine minerals, so there shouldn't have been any problems at all. The lady did not understand how the ground had weakened in just 2 years without explosives, because it was simply impossible. She asked who had done the research, and the case was too strange to draw such conclusions. According to the dean, this was done by Jacques Setorin, who was expelled from the academy a year ago. Jacques Setorin was an old man who had dedicated his entire life to geology and archaeology. His skills were undeniable, so if he had meticulously carried out all the research and concluded that the ground was unstable, it was most likely true. Moreover, as Rodelia admitted, the Lord of Spirits feels the energy of the earth directly, and this is also important. When the heroine first heard that Jacques was the master of spirits, she was surprised, because the dean had not told her about it at all. There have been many spirit masters among scientists. In geology, these are the spirits of the earth, in climatology and the wind, and they are often used in such studies. Jacques Setorin was one of the 20 advanced spirit masters of the empire, which is why this man possessed a lot of knowledge. There were also spirits living in this world of the novel, which meant that the master knew this man because they were both magicians and rulers. But now was not the time for that, and Ludia tried to calm her raging thoughts. After all, if Jacques is a spirit master, then there is a high probability that the research is true, which means that her mine will soon be closed. In any case, Rodelia happily accepted Ludia's request and also wanted to sort out the problem that had arisen. She promised that she would have free time in 2 weeks and suggested that they discuss all the details later. It seemed that the tangled ball began to slowly unravel, and something was being prepared that the lady did not even imagine. Rosalind finally returned and apologized for the wait. Her presentation was the last one today, so she asked the guests to be patient a little longer. Now the heroine understood where the lady had disappeared to, and she was preparing a new important presentation. Everyone present knew that Rosalind was also involved in explosives and had a lot of knowledge in this area. Over 30 years, it has created many components that combine power and stability, mostly created exclusively for industry. Now she wanted to offer her guests a new, large-scale product, stronger and more powerful than the others. She opened the box, which contained red balls, and these were small bombs that possessed incredible power. And it was this explosive that she created for a completely different purpose, which she wanted to present to everyone present. The destructive power of these small balls was 5 times greater than that of conventional bombs used previously. One of the guests raised his hand and asked if it was too dangerous to use such devices, which were incredibly powerful. He was also outraged that Rosalind brought such a dangerous thing here, since there was no guarantee for the safety of those around her. Suddenly, Teferi appeared in the audience and asked them not to doubt her work, because she never expected to be judged after living in this world for so many years. The master stated that this project was one of those she participated in with the dean of the Imperial University and added her knowledge to the research. She asked to remember well those who dared to doubt and mock a minute ago, because these people were making fun not only of the dean, but also of her, and of Roman himself. The one who gave the order for the production of these items was Marquis Roman Burchard, himself the commander of the Imperial Royal Knights. Now the master was going to show everyone present how this small ball, which contained incredible power, worked. With one wave of her hand, she threw a bomb at one of the people present who had just been jeering at her. Ludia was completely scared because the bomb could be dangerous, so the girl immediately covered her ears. She was already expecting a huge explosion, but fortunately nothing happened, and the hall remained silent. And the small burgundy ball lay on the floor, and there was no explosion, which the impudent young man had just spoken about. Teferi stated that everything was in perfect order, and those present could see it for themselves. After the presentation of the new product, the dean and Teferi sat down next to Ludia. She was surprised that the girl appeared there so unexpectedly. In fact, she was just worried about whether the presentation was going well, since she was also involved in the development of this product. After all, she was also involved and didn't like it when something she was involved in got bad reviews. The little girl shoved the whole delicious cookie into her mouth, and Ludia looked at her intently. The girl was sitting covered in crumbs. The heroine laughed and tried to brush the crumbs off her damp cheek with her finger. The master was indignant that it was enough to simply explain in words that there were crumbs, and it was not at all necessary to poke her in the cheek. The dean was surprised, because it turns out that Tefori can be quite lenient, although this had not been noticed about her before. Rosalind even tried to raise her hand and laughed, and the master began to loudly, indignantly say that the lady should not even think about doing this. The dean asked the heroine if she had managed to find an expert on geology, since she had probably already talked to some of the guests. She even worried that she simply should have done this earlier, but Ludia assured her that everything was in perfect order. She had already been introduced to someone, and Rosalind was very interested in what kind of geologist they found in scientific circles. This girl just happened to be somewhere here, and Ludia happily told about the pleasant acquaintance. Looking at the lady, the master said that this was not just a coincidence, but it definitely shouldn't happen. Rodelia and Jacques Sedorin are father and daughter, and the dean tells the heroine about it with admiration. And now Ludia was simply in shock, because this lady turned out to be a direct relative of the most powerful magician. Returning to the palace after the event, Ludia examined the documents and found out that an inspection of the mine had already been scheduled, but she couldn't understand at all how Jacques could be Professor Rodelin's father, and why she hadn't told her from the very beginning. Perhaps they had a complicated family history, and the lady decided to ask her friend to prepare the documents she asked for. Fortunately, Elian had already figured it out completely, and this time her friend took a responsible approach to completing work assignments. Her look was a little frightened, and Ludia even noticed that something was happening to the girl. A pale face, dull eyes, and her condition could be compared to an illness that had suddenly overtaken her. Even Elian's voice was sad, although she always communicated joyfully, but now she decided to turn to her friend. And suddenly she asked to give her a few days off, as if the lady really felt unwell. Ludia asked why she needed a vacation, and as it turned out, her grandmother had recently fallen ill. Now the heroine remembered that Elian had a special relationship with her grandmother. Sometimes she behaved selfishly and childishly, but her grandmother spoiled her and allowed her everything. Ludia happily agreed to help her friend and gave her the weekend, and also asked that she take care of herself. Suddenly, the girl became very happy, and Ludia even thought that her friend considered her a heartless, evil boss. The grandmother had been feeling unwell for a long time, and now she was feeling much worse, so she simply needed help for her granddaughter. Sadly, Elian reported that it seemed like she had very little time left and that her grandmother might die soon. Until now, she had only been a hindrance to the fulfillment of her goals, but now she felt incredibly sorry for her. She suggested finishing the paperwork and going home, promising to sort out the rest herself. Everything was fine, and Elian was incredibly glad that her friend understood how hard it was for her. Even if Elian took a vacation, she would have less time for everything else, and Ludia the Beautiful understood this. But now it was unknown whether the grandmother would feel even a little better, and how her friend would feel in the future. Prince Ban was working in his office every day, dealing with important matters, and he again encountered unexpected problems. The Count decided to give him a gift, but the prince had no idea whether he should take something like that. It was the Count who asked His Highness not to worry, since everything was supposedly being done out of great respect for him. He stated that this was not an attempt to beg for anything, but simply a gift, and the Crown Prince accepted it with great caution, while the Count only rubbed his palms from the successfully completed task that the lady had entrusted to him. Ban understood that this was just another bribe, and soon the Count would ask for some kind of favor, which he would have to unconditionally fulfill. There was a huge diamond in the dark velvet box, and the young man could not even imagine how much he had managed to buy it for. The assistant said that the jewel was worth about 1,000 platinum coins, and this was indeed a huge sum. The prince thought that 1,000 coins was only a tenth, but the assistant did not understand what exactly was being discussed. He asked to leave the precious stone here, and was going to think about what to do next with the Count. The assistant was surprised, because the young man never refused gifts, but now he did it only to understand who was really on his side and who was trying to use him. Suddenly, there was a loud knock at the door, and the assistant was surprised because no meetings were scheduled for today. Prince Rihanna's sister appeared at the door, her expression too serious for her unexpected visit. The young man asked why his sister was there, and she admitted that she was just passing by and decided to come in. Rihanna wanted to find out how the preparations were going for the festival, which was supposed to take place very soon. Surrounded by the important documents that stood in huge stacks on the prince's desk, Ban laughed and indicated that everything would go in full swing. The young man was indeed very busy, sorting through important papers in preparation for the festival. Unexpectedly, she asked when the young man had last seen Ludia because now she really needed this information. Ban was even surprised why his sister decided to ask such a question, but she insistently wanted to know the answer. The young man said that it seemed like they had seen each other more than a week ago, and for Rihanna this turned out to be a serious problem, so she asked the young man to listen to her carefully. She said that her brother could soon get into big trouble, and she wanted to help him. Ban didn't understand what was being discussed, since he hadn't received any threats from noble gentlemen lately. Rihanna said that the prince could soon be fired from his position, and asked the young man to think carefully. A young noblewoman, just coming of age and the eldest daughter in the family, and it was precisely Lady Ludia who was being talked about. But what was more important was that she was a representative of the trade guild and was friends with Countess Peliotin, so the girl probably had many connections. They say that there are guests at the Marquis Mertens's mansion every day, and the sister wondered if her brother didn't know the real reason. Now he irritated her with his stupidity because before Ludia had an official date with another man, she had to show her face in society at least once. Ban was indignant because his sister knew very well that lately it was difficult for him to get out of the office. But Rihanna insisted that no matter how busy he was, he didn't even have time to write a letter. The sister offered her help because only in this case the young man would have free time for a personal life. She promised to take responsibility for his work today and suggested that he go meet with Mrs. Ludia. She asked to first sort through the important documents and sort them by urgency of approval and wanted to finish everything before lunch. Ban couldn't believe his luck because he really wanted to see Ludia, but he was so busy with work that he couldn't even find a free minute. The sister acted wisely and decided to take everything into her own hands because she understood that her brother's personal life could now come first. Looking at the assistant, she asked when he would start sorting through the documents, and he promised to do it right away. At the same time, in Ludia's office, the girl was rereading important contracts and was also busy with work. Hearing a knock on the door, she shuddered because today she certainly did not expect guests. This was not just a guest, but her beloved mother, who lit up the entire office with her radiant smile. Mother almost never left the mansion, so her daughter was surprised why she decided to come straight to her office. The lady said that she simply wanted to ask her daughter something, but her visit was too sudden. While Ludia was carefully pouring tea, her mother asked if her daughter had started dating someone. The heroine began to worry and even poured tea on the table, asking what her mother meant. The lady asked if her daughter was not dating anyone, then why not arrange an official date and as soon as possible? She declared that there was nothing to be embarrassed about, and for Ludia this was so unexpected that she almost dropped her mug of tea. Recently, their family had been receiving a lot of gifts and letters from other families, and the noble young men wanted to formally meet such a respected one. Now the heroine remembered how she had been told about this, because that young man with a false smile was also considering an alliance with the Martins' house. Mother asked to set at least one specific date, and admitted that she already had several candidates. The first candidate turned out to be that same Jurad, the second son of the Boldras family, whom the lady had already been fortunate enough to meet at the conference. Ludia knew that he would be the first candidate, so she told her mother that she did not want an official date at all. But she couldn't tell the whole truth, as her heart had already been conquered by Prince Ban, whom she thinks about every minute. In the eyes of his mother, Prince Jurad looked like an excellent candidate, and she did not understand why her daughter categorically refused. So that her mother wouldn't pester her with questions, Ludia told her that she had just recently started dating someone. At this point, Mother immediately left the office and promised that they would soon see each other at home to discuss the details. Ludia simply said that she was dating someone, but she knew perfectly well that her mother would want to meet this person right away. But now she couldn't say that she had started a relationship with the honorable prince, and now the heroine had no idea what to do. After all, Mother will pester her with questions. Ludia will not be able to lie to her, and also will not be able to bring another person. Immediately after her mother's carriage left, another one appeared behind, which meant that another guest had arrived at the palace. The lady was about to head to her office, hoping that the staff would deal with the stranger's appearance, but she didn't know that the next second she would be in for an incredibly unexpected encounter. She seemed to freeze when a male voice called her name, piercing to the very goosebumps. And she could recognize this voice from 1,000 others, alluring, courageous, because it belonged to the prince himself. Getting out of the carriage, the delighted young gentleman admitted that he had not seen Ludia for a very long time, and he was incredibly happy to meet. Ludia could not believe her eyes at all, because the prince himself came to her without warning and admitted that he simply wanted to see her. After all, they had not seen each other for more than 10 days, and tenderly taking the girl's hand, he felt the warmth of her touch, which he had been waiting for so long. The heroes were too busy with work, but none of them forgot about each other, keeping warm memories of the last evenings spent in their souls. The lady immediately decided to tell the whole truth and ask the prince for one favor that needed to be done as soon as possible. The lady whispered something in his ear, and the young man was ready to fulfill any request that she would boldly ask. After listening to her request, he happily declared that he would gladly do anything. He was happy to help the sweet lady, because now she incredibly needed his support more than ever. A few days later, at the mansion of Marquis Mertens, an unexpected meeting took place where Ludia asked the prince to behave naturally. With the help of magic, the young man changed his hairstyle, and the heroine was going to introduce him as her new boyfriend. He had to hide his black hair and red eyes so that his mother wouldn't recognize him as the crown prince, and white hair and blue eyes was a fairly common appearance. To avoid official dates, it was necessary to show that the girl already had a partner, but under no circumstances could it be revealed that this was a secret affair with the most famous person in the empire. The daughter didn't want to lie to her mother, but she had absolutely no other choice, because if rumors started to spread, it would be a big problem. Ban asked how he should introduce himself because his mother should know his name, but a name that would not be mentioned in secular circles. Ludia asked what family Ben's mother, a concubine, was from, so that she could choose the right name from there. These people were provincial nobles who had never been to the capital, so no one knew them here, and the heroine asked them to introduce themselves as the 4th son of the Zaxenbadil family. She decided to name him number 4 because number 3 might be too young, and number 4 was just right. For the 5th son, the young man must have looked too old, and at that moment their hands touched each other. Ludia asked not to worry too much about it, because it was just a normal official meeting with her mother, where Ban would act as a completely different person. When the heroes appeared before their mother, she was so happy that even her daughter had never seen her so happy. A sumptuous table was set for them, and even Ludia thought that her mother was smiling more often than usual today. She asked him to express his opinion about Banya, and the lady simply admitted that she liked this nobleman from the very first seconds. But the daughter wanted to know the details and asked what her mother liked the most, because she clearly noticed something. Mother admitted that the young man was incredibly handsome, his noble face expressed good nature, and his blue eyes were so deep that one wanted to drown in them. Ban followed the story he had made up and said that he was from the Zaxenbadil family, from a small holding near the city in the south. The town was called Peroni, and even Mother had been there several times, so she happily declared that she would visit Ban's relatives. Ludia didn't need this at all, and she didn't want her mother to go there unexpectedly. The lady admitted that if a daughter and a young man are going to get married, then it is necessary to get to know the elders and parents in the young man's family. Although she liked Ban incredibly, Ludia was too surprised that her mother immediately thought about marriage, and the embarrassed young man only turned his head to the side, because now they would have to hide this lie so that it would seem like the truth to Mother Ludia.